timestamps. Okie dokie. So, lots happened in the last week. The Winter Olympics is still ongoing. Obviously, there's been a fair bit of scandal in regards to the Winter Olympics. And yeah, viewership figures haven't been great. There's been a lot of. I haven't watched any of the Winter Olympics. And that's in stark contrast to 4 years ago, where I actually watched some of the events. But the way the build up to the Winter Olympics, and some of the scandal at this Winter Olympics, and generally just tuning out really in regards to the Winter Olympics. So yeah, not really overly fussed with the Winter Olympics. A lot of complaints from the athletes about the athletes' village, the facilities. Lots of issues there. There's been issues in the ice skating. Um, there's been issues with the venues not being up to scratch. There's obviously been the build up to this Winter Olympics. There's been the political boycott by countries and the diplomatic boycott. The NHL not letting their players play, so that's been noted as well. And quite frankly, considering how the Tokyo Summer Olympics went, I'm not surprised that the viewership isn't on the same level, and the interest isn't on the same level. Quite frankly, we're on day 15, and I have got no interest. I know the men's Olympic ice hockey finals tomorrow. I won't be watching it. If I'm honest, will not be watching it. So yes, in regards to that, there is that. Obviously, Storm Eunice has caused a lot of problems across Northwest Europe, and that's affected sport. Bournemouth, I think, was one of the teams in the football leagues have damaged their stadium. Barrow Rugby League Club had damaged their stadium as well. So there were some sporting fixtures affected. Bad weather has hit the whole of the UK, Ireland, and most of Northwest Europe. So that has been noted. Oh, got to cut my arm. And so, yeah, in regards to some other sports news, the NRL, the pre-season trial matches have started to take place this weekend, and we'll have 2 full weeks of trials matches, and then we go into full pre-season training. And we're just over a month away from the start of the season. They've made a rule tweak to some of the rule changes they brought in over the last 2 years. And there's been a lot of criticism of the amount of rule changes brought in over the last 2 years in the NRL in regards to too many rule changes, too many blowout score lines. There's also been concerns about the Dolphins getting a stacked team next year and trying to balance out the availability of players and how many contracts can be signed. There's also enlarged squads this year for the NRL. They've increased the squad sizes because players have still been testing positive for COVID. So that's another rule that's been brought in, is expanded squad sizes, which should mitigate any COVID issues. There should be full capacity at stadiums this year, hopefully. There's still an issue over what will happen with the New Zealand Warriors, whether they'll be able to play games at home in New Zealand or not. In the women's competition, the Warriors have pulled out this year, which is very interesting. So they've withdrawn from the women's competition. So there is some question mark about the long-term future of the Warriors, whether they end up being permanently based in Australia or whether they can go home to play games at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland. This will be the 3rd season where they haven't started the season at home. So that is something to bear in mind. And they've signed a lot of Australian-based players into their squad to compensate for that fact. Okay, so Chelsea have won, Liverpool have won, Watford, Burnley and Arsenal and Southampton have all won today. So interesting. Let's have a look. So West Ham won, Newcastle won, Arsenal beat Brentford 2-1, Watford beat Aston Villa 1-0. Burnley beat Brighton 3-0. That's a massive win for Burnley with the games in hand. They have Chelsea's beat Crystal Palace 1-0. Liverpool put 3 past Norwich. Southampton put 2 past Everton. Everton are in serious trouble in the Premier League. And Man City play Tottenham at 5:30, which is in just over 20 minutes' time as UK time. We got what else? St Helens beat Hull. Had a player sent off. Derby beat Peterborough, which is crucial in their survival hopes in the Championship. Valavia obviously is the Russian figure skater who's only 15 years old, and so I do think with that scandal, if I can be honest, with the Olympic ice skating scandal where she was thrown out of the competition, then brought back in, she failed doping. She finished 4th overall in the individual women's figure skating competition. Question marks have to be asked about the minimum age requirements to be an Olympic athlete. We know there's some even younger athletes competing both the summer and winter games. There was, I think, a 13-year-old competing at the Summer Olympics in one of the events, and we've seen young athletes who are teenagers compete at Winter and Summer Olympics before. But there has to be question marks over the minimum age limit to compete at the Olympics. I appreciate the love and knowledge of all my sports. I don't know every single sport. I'm not an expert on every sport. I wouldn't go that far. I think I've been asked the question where I get my love from sport from. I think it was people say accessibility is key, and I do believe that was key in being when I was brought up. The debate about TV rights and media rights being as accessible as possible, I think, is key in that argument. But I played sport at school as well. I was always encouraged to enjoy it, I suppose. And I think I'm from quite a sporty family. I think that helps. I think I'm the sportiest member of my family in regards to me brothers, my stepbrothers, my brother and my sister. I'm the sportiest in my family. My stepdad I think still plays amateur cricket. I think he used to go on a cricket tour every summer with the local cricket club and some friends. I don't think he does it anymore. He did for many years. He's a big cricket fan and a big Rugby Union fan. But no, my mum was always very supportive of and very understanding of the fact that I would just on a weekend take over the TV. So I think my love of sports comes from my family basically enabling my love of sports and encouraging it. I wouldn't say I know every sport. I think there are certain sports where I feel that I have a disinterest in or I've fallen out of love with. I think F1 in a motorsport context is definitely one of the forms of motorsport I no longer enjoy watching or anything like that. I fell out of love with it many years ago. I think part of the issue with F1 is the regulations they have. Now, Massey has been dropped as the race director going forward, which is crucial. The FIA have decided to drop him. What do I think about Chelsea and Liverpool winning? That's a very interesting one. I think Liverpool in the end get a comfortable scoreline. Chelsea had to come, really leave it late against Palace and I think Liverpool are the slightly stronger team. If I'm being honest, I think Chelsea, they're not being as fluent in their performances. They're not dominating teams that they should be. And so they're sort of labouring in games a little bit more, and there could be a multiple reasons for that. There could be a lot of reasons for some of Chelsea's below par performances. They're still winning games, and that's a sign of a very good side. If you're not playing well but still getting results, that's the sign of a very good side. um, where things may not be going right, but they're still finding a way to win. That's the sign of a very, very good team. But looking at reading some of the match reports, and when I've been watching things like the FA Cup and things like that this season, um, and I do know a lot of Chelsea fans as well, which helps, I suppose, when you're trying to formulate an idea of a team and make an opinion on how they're playing and stuff. Um, they are labouring a little bit. So, and they've been labouring since the Lukaku situation, where he basically said he would rather have stayed at Inter, basically. And Lukaku's form this season hasn't been great. He's not scoring a lot of goals. He's not being as effective on the field, and that's borne out with how how the results have been, really. But I mean, look, I mean, they're still in the FA Cup. They're still in the Champions League. They're technically still in the league hunt. So, and I think they could win. I think they're in the hunt for a League Cup as well. So they're still in the hunt for multiple trophies. There's still a long way to go in the season. It is obviously Man City's title to lose, however unlikely that may be. But Man City could come over this season with only one piece of silverware, which could be just the Premier League title. That's what we could end up seeing. Quite frankly, I think the trophies are going to be very evenly distributed at the end of the season between the clubs that are competing for them. And we may see an underdog winner in the FA Cup. I think teams like Crystal Palace, for example, have a very, very good chance in the FA Cup to spring a slight underdog surprise when it comes to the latter stages of that tournament. So we'll see what happens in regards. What do I think about Chelsea and Liverpool winning? They are two good sides. They are, and certain teams like Everton and Brentford and Brighton are starting to wobble a little bit. So the relegation battle, I think, is going to be a little bit more intense than what it was back in October, November time when managerial changes were happening. Um, Burnley winning today is a massive result, massive result, because it completely shakes up the relegation dogfight. And Everton losing yet again, it doesn't matter who's in charge. There are massive problems at that football club, and you know the issues at Everton are very, very long standing. And then you have to look at the structures behind the scenes. This is where Chelsea, even though I'm not a fan of the constant managerial turnover at Chelsea and how that can have a negative impact on the playing squad, and I don't know how long that model can work for Chelsea. The structures behind the scenes allow any new manager to come in to seamlessly slot in, and then he can build his team how he wants with the structures supporting him in place. Whereas teams like Everton and Watford, they don't have those solid off-field structures in place to enable the constant managerial changeover that takes place. And there's the difference. Chelsea are a successful team with the structures they have in place, even with multiple managerial changeover, whereas teams like Everton are not successful and they've spent a lot of money, and they are in serious trouble. Now, whether Lampard can keep them up or not, we'll wait and see. I mean, he hasn't won in the league yet. He has won in the cup, but they are hanging over the precipice of falling into a relegation fight. And Lampard, as a manager, has never been involved in a relegation fight. And he's very inexperienced. So this could be very, very interesting. Was that the correct appointment? But at the same time, what is the long-term plan for Everton? Because if they do get relegated, they are in serious trouble. Serious trouble. And where do you go from here with that team? Um, so that's an interesting one. I think, yeah, that's something that needs to be looked at. Obviously, I've been covering and following the Major League Baseball lockout from the beginning, and I know not everyone on this channel is a Major League Baseball fan, but I do think it has ramifications beyond baseball. Positive for some sports, negative for baseball. So we know that there's been more proposals put on the table by the league, and so in the last day, Major League Baseball has delayed spring training games until March the 5th. So again, the lockout's continued. That's now official. The union and the players, the union, which is the players' union, and the league met again with a counter offer. Apparently, the last meeting over the last couple of days lasted just 15 minutes. So, and they literally submitted a revised arbitration proposal. So they're not making any progress in breaking the deadlock between the league and the owners. So let's have a look at Yahoo Sports because that's the top article that's on the list of articles. Right, let's see what Jack Bayer, who wrote on yesterday in his article. So Major League Baseball delays spring training until March 5th as the lockout continues. Major League Baseball has begun postponing games amid a lockout that has gone on for more than 2 months. Technically, it's nearly gone on for nearly 3 months. It remains to be seen if the league will cancel games that count. I think they will start. It will start affecting the regular season at this point. The league announced Friday at the beginning of its spring training schedule has been postponed until March 5th at the earliest. All tickets will reportedly be fully refunded to fans. So if you're a season ticket holder, you're getting a refund as collective bargaining agreement negotiations continue with the Players Association and the league. Now, this is the league statement. So I'm now quoting the league statement. We regret without a CBA agreement in place, we must postpone the start of spring training games until no earlier. So the earliest they will start playing spring training is March 5th. So that's just over 2.5 weeks. All 30 clubs are unified in their strong desire to bring players back to the field and fans back to the stands. The clubs have adopted a uniform policy that provides an option for full refunds for fans who have purchased tickets from the clubs to any spring training games. Mostly season ticket holders would have been the first refusal there. That are not taking place. We are committed to reaching an agreement that is fair to each side. On Monday, members of the owners' bargaining committee will join an in-person meeting with the Players Association and remain every day next week to negotiate and work hard towards starting the season on time. So negotiations resume on Monday. The MLBPA, so the Players Association, soon responded with its own statement, which it doubted the necessity of the Major League Baseball's move and noted the lockout itself is explicitly the owners' doing, which it is because the owners all voted in favour of it. So the Players Association statement is very short, very brief. It's a couple of lines. Major League Baseball announced today that it must postpone the start of spring training, must being heavily emphasised in their statement. This is false. Nothing requires the league to delay the start of spring training, much like nothing required the league's decision to implement the lockout in the first place. Despite these decisions by the league, players remain committed to the negotiating process. In a normal off-season, pitchers and catchers would have already started reporting 4 days ago, with all other players showing up over the next week. This is not normal off-season. The MLB and the Players Union have exchanged several proposals over the last few weeks, so all that has seemed to lead to these short meetings and public posturing. The most recent meeting lasted only 15 minutes. The head negotiator of Major League Baseball, Dan Halem, and the Players Association head negotiator, Bruce Meyer, had a subsequent side meeting that lasted 20 minutes, so in total 35 minutes worth of meetings. The Major League Baseball set a date of 28th of February, so a week Monday, as a deadline for an agreement before opening day will have to be postponed. Right, let's see what else is being stated. So basically the top article, it's not looking likely that the Major League Baseball lockout is ending anytime soon. The league is given until the 28th. They are proposing that they have meetings every day next week in order to meet the 28th of February deadline, and they've already delayed the start of spring training by several weeks. So I think it's likely that part of, if not all of the season will be lost. It's growing increasingly likely. Every proposal is hit with a counter proposal, and the meetings are short, brief, and not in good faith. So there we go on the Major League Baseball situation, and I can't see any change as things currently stand with the positions that both sides have taken. They're both strongly entrenched. The Players Association is correct. It is the owners that have decided to vote unanimously. It's basically the league that has decided this course of action. So the Players Association is correct in their statement, saying it's the league decided to go down this route. What surprises me about this whole situation with Major League Baseball and I will start taking questions on other subjects if you want to put them in the question section, is that I am surprised that back in 2020, so just under a year and a half ago, when they were talking about the resumption of play talks in the summer of 2020, that they didn't look at the CBA and trying to amend the CBA. I'm very, very surprised that both sides allowed it to lapse. And that partly lies with the Players Association not wanting to renegotiate before the end of the agreement back in December, but also the league. There was a big concern that we may see a player strike or a lockout a year and a half ago. I do think that the pandemic definitely sped up this situation. I think it exposed a lot of problems within Major League Baseball, and the fact that they didn't resolve those issues when they had a chance to, when the league was shut down, not because of player strike or lockout, but because of a pandemic. And the Players Association and the league didn't decide to resolve their issues when they had the time to do so. There was a lot of time on their hands. And in the end, we got a very short and condensed season. We got some playoffs. We got a World Series played. Last year, again, got a World Series played. And then we're talking days, up to 2 days before the lockout, big contracts were being signed worth millions and millions of dollars were still being signed by free agents. Trades were still taking place in the off season. Player movement, contract negotiations, contract extensions, and they were signing these big contracts. The team owners were throwing money around like it was going out of fashion, and then unanimously decided to, you know, enact the lockout. They all 30 teams have agreed to it. Now it takes a 2/3 majority for any proposal to pass. So let's say they want to expand to 32. 20 teams minimum, 20 owners minimum would have to agree to an expansion to 32 teams. The risk that Major League Baseball is playing with is other sports are going to pick up the slack of frustrated sports fans who want their fix, really. And I do think Major League Soccer could massively benefit from Major League Baseball having a disrupted season. I think fans definitely are frustrated. And it'll be interesting to see what Major League Baseball fans feel about this, because it seems that every proposal that the league puts on the table, the Players Association either put up with a counter proposal or reject out of hand, and then the counter proposal they put on the table is rejected out of hand, and there is no negotiating in good faith. Now, I can link this into other sports. This pandemic has highlighted a lot of issues within professional sport, a lot of financial mismanagement. That's got to be a noted thing. Financial mismanagement is a massive, massive thing. I honestly believe that. You know, huge wastage of money. A lot of bad contracts have been exposed. How reliant gate receipts of fans actually going in attendance to professional sport has obviously a thing. I think when professional teams were saying, the TV money's enough for our business model to survive, it clearly wasn't the case. And we've seen the European Super League debacle with European football, or soccer as North Americans would call it, and the fans' response to that was visceral. We've heard rumours about the Six Nations and bringing South Africa in and throwing Italy out, which have been very, very quickly downplayed by all six unions and the Six Nations Organising Committee. There is a concern with a company called CVC buying a majority stake in a lot of sports that would be the case. They very quickly dispelled those rumours, very, very quickly. But when it was circulating the internet, the negativity towards that proposed change was fair to all to see. And Rugby Union's got a lot of problems. And look at the collapse of the Super Rugby franchise, original Super Rugby franchise system with the South African teams leaving en masse, and the restructuring of an Australian, New Zealand, like Pacific Super Rugby setup. The restructuring of the Pro League to the United Rugby Championship with the South African teams joining in there. and there's still logistical issues with that. Look what happened over the Christmas period with the Omicron variant of COVID, and teams getting stuck in South Africa and not being able to play games, teams having to quarantine players en masse. So there's that to factor in. Um, the future of the Lions tour, and whether the Lions tour will be an ongoing thing in the future. And again, fans being really frustrated with it being solely on subscription only TV in the UK and Ireland, and that's something that has definitely been criticised um, in recent years. I'm losing my voice. Uh, so there is a lot of things that the COVID pandemic has exposed. Um, and the fact that the Rugby League World Cup had to be delayed by a year, the Summer Olympics delayed by a year, the Euros delayed by a year. I'm losing my voice all of a sudden. Right, and now we've got this Qatar Football World Cup at the end of the year, which is already having an impact on this European football season, where we've already seen the FA Cup scrapping replays after the third round. Now, we've seen over time that replays are slowly being, withdrawn from the later rounds of the FA Cup, and has been for a very, very long time. Could the I think it was Barrow versus Ipswich. Could that be the last FA Cup replay we ever see? And that was in the second round this season. So that's something that's been noted. And then we've got this proposed format of the World Cup going to every 2 years. Now, FIFA Pro, who represent all the players' unions, done surveys. 75% of players are against, in total, the moving the World Cup to a 2-year cycle. More players from the African unions are in favour. Associations are in favour. But even then, it's still under 50%. So that tells you something completely. And they're still trying to push ahead with this, even though there's no, where are they going to host these tournaments? It won't happen anytime soon, I don't think. It does devalue the product. And then you could argue, okay, well, if they want to expand the amount of teams at the World Cup, allow more African teams to qualify. Plain and simple. But if you look at the Africa Cup of Nations quality that we saw last month, it wasn't great. Not going to lie, the Africa Cup of Nations, the quality I saw in the field was absolutely appalling. Not good enough. Liverpool to win the league. Might be this season, could be next season. They've added a bit of depth in, and they've got some good young players coming through their academy. And so Liverpool are actually spending less money in the transfer market bringing players in, because they're developing players internally, which is important. And yeah, Liverpool to win the league. That is definitely on the cards again. It's not just a one-off with the Jurgen Klopp winning the league with them. I can see them possibly next season giving the title a good knock. The problem is next season is the World Cup in Qatar and the suspension of play and the disruption to the league schedule in Europe. But yes, I think they've made some very shrewd moves in the transfer market. They are developing players from within their own academy, which is very, very important, which means they actually spend less money in said transfer market, which is important. And they've got a bit more squad depth now than a couple of seasons ago. So yes, I do believe it is feasible that they can win the league again within the next season or two. It all depends on how the World Cup impacts playing squads with players getting injured, players getting fatigued from the World Cup as well. So it does. There are things to bear in mind with next season, but it's already having an impact this season. So I think Liverpool have a very good shot in the FA Cup. They have a very good shot in the Champions League and the League Cup. So they can still win 3 trophies this season. And technically, they can still win the league this season. But I think that's a long shot in regards to the points differential that Man City have over the rest of the league as things currently stand. That's not to say they can't do it. Batting collapses, I say, or sudden losses of form do happen. I think Man City are going to find it difficult to win all, the Champions League, the FA Cup, and the Premier League. I think they're going to find it a bit more difficult than they anticipated. Cup competitions are actually, ironically, form goes out the window on a knockout match because it is a winner takes all to progress to the next round. So regular league games are completely different to cup games, in my opinion. So I do think it's more difficult to win um, league and cup trophies. You've got to focus on one or the other. And Man City regular league form, they are so consistent, but in the knockout cup competitions, apart from the League Cup, they don't win a lot. So in regards to trophies, they've only won the FA Cup twice under the current ownership, and they've never won the Champions League or a European trophy under the current ownership. It's only been in recent seasons that they reached the later stages of the Champions League. So that has to be borne out. But I can see Liverpool winning the league again. They've got the right structures at the club, and the right youth development, and the right pieces in place at the club. They've got the right. I think they're building on the squad depth. They are developing talent from within, which I do think is absolutely crucial. I'm also surprised that the transfer market was the second highest spend in January that the Premier League's ever had. Find that very surprising considering the financial results that clubs were reporting after the last 12 months. So very surprised with the transfer spend that we saw. I better put my phone on charge actually. Ugh. But yeah, it is what it is. What we got being stupid internet chronic. But yeah, no, it's very interesting. The question: can Liverpool win the league? I think they can next season. I think this season they can. They've just got to focus on the cup competitions, where they have a very good chance of winning 3 trophies. And if they did that as a cup treble, which is, I think, rarer than a League Cup double. I think winning three knockout cups is exceptionally rare achievement. I am going through my ashtray to make a cigarette, which is completely desperate. It shows how poor I am right now, actually. Right, you've got a lot of backy in there. You've got a lot of backy in that one. This is absolute peasant material I'm doing here. I shouldn't be doing this. This is grotty. So chav. Save you as an emergency backup. But no, it's interesting. Oh god. So yeah. The Montreal Canadiens broke their longest ever losing streak. This I think overnight. This week they'd I think lost 10 or 12 games in a row. They're still in single figure wins for the season, which is ridiculous. So the Montreal Canadiens, if you're an NHL fan, the Montreal Canadiens, they are having an absolute write-off of the season. Never seen a team go from Stanley Cup finalists to being the worst team in the league ever in my lifetime. I don't think it's ever going to happen again. It's generally an appalling return for a team that, until the start of this season, was a solid outfit. Not outstanding, but solid. So, question marks about what's happened at Montreal over the last couple of years. Oh God. Oh God. Get this roll up made. But yeah, so the situation at the Montreal Canadiens, Marty St. Louis has got a very tough job. Obviously, he's in there as an interim coach. So it's basically a big job interview for him. Obviously, his goal is just to win as many games as possible, because I don't think the fans want tanking to be a thing, although they could obviously increase their chances of a first overall pick. But will that fix the problems that Montreal have? I think the obsession in Montreal for a French speaking coach and GM or a French Canadian is damaging the direction the team can and possibly should take. But yes, so yeah, if you're an ice hockey fan, the situation with the Montreal Canadiens makes very interesting reading up on the situation and looking at the situation from a neutral standpoint. I don't think I've come across a team that's gone from being Stanley Cup finalists to the worst team in the league. I don't think that turnaround has ever happened before, from being runners up or finalists or whatever to being on your knees. And there are question marks over the Carey Price contract and how much money he's been paid, and uh, will he play again? Will he play again this season? Huge question marks about the signing of that contract. Um, and so that's going to go on and on and on. But it's an interesting one, looking at the situation with Montreal, um, and the direction the team's taken, and the the mess that is the Montreal Canadiens. At a time when if you look at Canadian sport, in comparison to the US when it comes to revenue, Montreal is one of the biggest sports markets in the US and Canada. But yeah, it's not looking good. In regards to Major League Baseball, back to Major League Baseball, and this is something that I have been thinking about, looking at the Montreal Expos, and are we feeling any storm effects? We had a couple of trees down around my block of flats. The little bungalow, which is, if I'm looking at my back over here, it's just over there. Tree narrowly missed my neighbour's bungalow, and they've got a young baby, and it literally missed it by a few feet. Um, I was out working in it yesterday, which I thought was ridiculous, and I do think that there's going to be a few very unhappy um, um, colleagues on Monday morning. Locally, we've had some power outages, although not in my location. Although up the road, some of my friends have had some of their properties damaged. Transport links. It's lucky I'm not travelling by train this weekend because I wouldn't get anywhere. Um, there's been issues on the motorways. I've just set fire to myself with a cigarette. I've set fire to my fucking carpet in my bed. I personally haven't had any effects. But there's been a lot of trees down in my local area. There's been some power outages, not where I live, but nearby. But it's been a weird one. I know it's the storm. We've had, well, two storms in the space of a week that have come through the northwest European area. I know Ireland got a hammering as well, and Scotland and Northern England and Wales. My uncle's going to be busy with his job with the local council where he lives down in the southwest of England, because he's in charge of building maintenance. So he's going to be doing a lot of inspection of council properties. Personally, myself, no ill effects, but my job is obviously quite dangerous as it is. We had to avoid a few there was fallen trees all over the place, car accidents, transport disruption. But overall, I'm all right. I might have a little wander tomorrow in the morning and see what the aftermath is, see how many trees are down, and have a little wander. I might put a video up on the other channel. A lot of trees down though. Literally, there's a couple in our communal garden that have come down. Thankfully, not near the main building. There was a tree out the front, had some branches snapped off that ended up in the road. Big chunks of tree ended up in the road, which I cleared out the way, which were blocking access to the building as well as to the main road. But we were reasonably lucky. A lot of rain though. So we'll see. I might go for a little wander tomorrow morning, get some breakfast, and see what the aftermath is. Uh, we were lucky where we were. I'm going to admit that. The power didn't go off. The heating didn't go off. The internet hasn't been affected at the moment. But literally a few miles up, 6, 7 miles up the road, where I live, power's out. Homes are without power. Other side of Reading, West Berkshire, um, whole swathes of West Berkshire. I know it's more rural, but no power, flooding. There's been flood warnings in place. We had a lot of rain overnight and a lot of rain this morning. A lot of rain overnight. But if I was to look out my window, it's clear at the moment. The wind's died down um, quite significantly, which is nice. I'm going to see what the weather update is actually. I know there was a pitch inspection at the Blackburn game because heavy snow fell up further north as well. There was concerns about snow, and there were some snow showers floating around last night around the south of England, in the southwest and the southeast. There were some snow showers floating around. So I do think there's possibly more bad weather to come. Potential disruption due to wind. It's meant to rain all day tomorrow. Which is bloody pleasant. Let's have a little look at the weather update because this is going to affect more sport, I think, in the coming days. We know several stadiums have been short term. If there are strong winds, look likely. Spell of heavy rain. The rain has passed over now, but there's another band of heavy rain and another storm front coming in later. So this evening it's going to rain again between 10 and midnight. So do I reckon Spurs could challenge for the title in the next 5 years? No, not with their current squad. Conte's come out and said that instead of strengthening the squad, they weakened their squad, and whether that was his doing or other reasons. 4 players out, 2 players in. That says to me a weakening of the squad. I think they're going to have to look at their youth setup for growing the squad. Personally, I think their transfer policy has been a shambles for many years. I think in regards to the their title chances, I can't see them winning any silverware anytime soon unless a drastic change in the direction of the team takes place. And when I say the direction of the team, I mean how the squad is made up, the balance of the squad, the style of football they play, their transfer policy. They're not attracting players, plain and simple, in my opinion. Uh, and that's something to consider. They're not attracting players. They're not achieving what they should achieve um, with the amount of money that the club's worth and the amount of money they've spent on the stadium. Their lack of investment in the squad while they were building the stadium, I think, is coming home now to affect them quite significantly. So you could argue, you know, in hindsight, the stadium rebuild should have happened later on. They should have focused on trying to win silverware in their purple patch under Pochettino. They didn't win that silverware under Pochettino. So I think, yeah, while a lot of clubs are looking at either refurbing, expanding, or building new stadiums, you've got to have a solid foundation to build upon. Obviously, the 2016 Premier League title going to Leicester, they were neck and neck with Leicester, and they ended up finishing third, and they dropped well back towards the last couple of weeks of the season. The issues with Pochettino, Mourinho, Nuno, and now Conte, that's a lot of managerial turnover in a very short spell of time. So some of the decision making that the club hierarchy have made over a long period of time with Spurs, I think is definitely having an impact on where the club sits. Can they compete for trophies? It's more than just the FA Cup or League Cup or Champions League or Europa League or whatever cup competitions they're giving a go. League titles. There's being competitive and a pretty solid outfit, and then there's being a class outfit that actually does bring silverware into the trophy cabinet. For some reason, they seem to do reasonably well against City. Is this something tactical, or just a fluke or fluke wins? Several clubs have a good record against Man City. Ironically, it's not just Spurs. The way City set up without a centralised, front striker and out-and-out striker, they obviously never replaced Aguero either. I think is an actual weakness rather than a strength. If you press them high in midfield and rough them up a little bit, they City like a lot of possession. Um, and if you give them that possession, they're happy with slow build up at times. They're happy keeping the ball. So what you've got to do is press them high and press them with intensity as a unit. And a lot of teams, fitness is a thing, and a lot of teams have proven that if you employ a press in midfield and put their defence under pressure, where the defenders have to play out from the back, which they're competent doing when you don't have any pressure on them. When you put that little bit of pressure on them, they fall apart. They don't know what to do. The obsession by Guardiola for the sweeper keeper and the passing out from the back constantly, you need a plan B. You need a tactical plan B, and you do need that out and out striker. Now, regular league form, City are just consistent. They are consistent in the regular season. But when it comes to the cup competitions, you take the League Cup away, which they're not winning this season. 2 FA Cups since the Sheikh Mansour takeover. They've won 2 FA Cups and 6 League Cups. Make of that what you will. And yes, you can throw the Premier League in there as well, but the cup competitions, they haven't got the success that they should have with the strength of squad and the quality that team has, and their obsession with not playing with an out and out centre forward or strike partnership and playing creative attacking players out of position up front makes me scratch my head. I think they could have more success, even more success, and that's scary if they actually had an out and out striker up front or a pair of strikers up front. So those creative players they've got too many creative players basically. You've got too much of a good thing, and that creates a problem in the balancing of the midfield and giving all those players adequate game time where they're all contributing a fair amount to the team. And that's something that I've noted with City. Tottenham having a good record. Some teams really do have those teams they struggle against regularly and have bad records against, even if they are winning trophies all the time. There are those teams where the derby bragging rights, whatever. Certain teams up their game. So that's something. Can Rangers win the Europa League this year? Well, they've won the first leg away from home at Dortmund, and that game should have been on free-to-air TV. I think any British club in the knockout stages of the European Cup competition should be on free-to-air TV, be it ITV or BBC or Channel 4, Channel 5, whatever the network carrier may be. So they've got themselves in a very good position against Dortmund. If they can knock Dortmund off, then anything's possible. I remember when they got to the final against Zenit St. Petersburg all those years ago, 2008, and that was a fantastic run they had. It would be a massive boost, I think, for Scottish football should Rangers do it. If any other club was to do it, it would be, I think, even better. But I think that would be a massive boost for Scottish football. It's been a very, very long time since the Scottish side, as I say, Rangers had a decent run. So we'll see what happens. Just watching the City Spurs game now, looks like Spurs is doing well in terms of midfield press, which is crucial. You have to get that midfield press spot on. Can they sustain the sharpness? Well, if you get City off their game and put pressure on that back three or the back four or the back five, depending how they set up the defensive line, they do make a lot of mistakes. They're not as the fact that City don't concede many goals is because they score like 5 or 6 and then the game's done. you cannot allow City to have lengthy spells of possession at their pace because they can just dictate the play. And so, yes, I think Conte has got he's got a Premier League and an FA Cup in English football already to his resume, so he knows how to beat City. You don't win the Premier League and the FA Cup without having to beat City at some point along the way in the season. Um, in regards to can they keep it up, I do think there's still a balance issue with the squad. I think Spurs have definitely got their squad balance wrong. And that lack of silverware from that purple patch between 2015 and 2019, I think, is coming home to really hit home now. They've made a lot of transfer market mistakes, in my opinion. They've definitely got things wrong in the transfer market with Levy as chairman over the last 20 odd years with the current ownership. Yeah, the current ownership's been in charge for a very, very long time. And they've definitely made mistakes in that period. Now, they've only won one trophy in that period. That was the League Cup back in 2008. So it's been a very, very long time without silverware. Now, they've made it to some cup finals in that time, a Champions League and a couple of League Cups, and they've won nothing. And so there is an issue with that. There is a problem with that. And the managerial turnover under the ownership that is currently in place is head scratching at best. They've had a lot of good managers who've won silverware at other clubs. I'm going to put that in there. Before or after, it doesn't really matter where they won the silverware, but they've had managers who won silverware at other clubs who've managed the club and have won nothing. And that I find mystifying. I really, really do. So that is a head scratcher in itself. Now, Pochettino won his silverware after leaving Tottenham. Harry Redknapp had several spells at Tottenham. Martin Jol, Juande Ramos. You know, you've multiple managers who've won silverware at other clubs, be it in the UK or in Europe, in various European leagues, not just the big five, but have gone there and have come away with nothing. So that does suggest to me that there are issues with how the behind the scenes structures, the structures off the field, are in place, and that can be everything from the transfer policy to how the business model structure is set up. Who reports to whom, who's in what position, what money's spent where, and as I say, you put Conte at Chelsea, you win trophies. So I don't think it's because the managers are bad. I'm going to put that out there. I don't think it's because the managers are bad. I think there are other issues within the club, from the ownership down to the tea lady, that is not right. There's something not right with Spurs because you've got managers who've won everything in European football, who can't get Spurs to win anything. I think they did spend the Bale money wisely in a sense. It's just every single player that they've signed to replace with the Gareth Bale money has also moved on. So that tells you something. I don't think Eric Lamela was a bad player. I think he was injury prone. I think that's hampered his time at Spurs. But bringing Gareth Bale back was what he didn't do much, and there've been question marks over. It's not just Gareth Bale. They've had a lot of good players who play for Spurs, who are top level players who've won silverware elsewhere, and I'm going to keep putting that in there. They've spent money, and players have come to the club who have been very, very good in whatever league they've been playing in. They've had managers come to the club who've won silverware, at other clubs, and they've won nothing. And what really got me is when they sacked Mourinho days before a cup final. And at that point, he was the only manager to beat Guardiola in a cup final. That was the one that was the real, what are you doing? Like, what is Levy? The problem is, I think, with the chairman and the owner. That's where all problems lie. the culture of the club, the philosophy, the direction, the they've not spent the bail money as wisely as they could have possibly, but it's very difficult to get an exact like for like. You need to alter your squad setup, the balance of the squad. They could have invested in a multitude of players and made that squad have more squad depth. So when it comes to the FA Cup, the League Cup, the Champions League, or Europa League, depending on what European competition they're in, they can rotate the squad a bit and have a bit of squad depth where when you get through the festive period and the fixtures stack up and you get injuries and you get suspensions and the Africa Cup of Nations and all this, you've got that squad depth to absorb the the fixture congestion. They haven't got that. Not follow Spurs that closely, but from a squad perspective, it looks like they keep removing key players and replacing them with rotation players. That's an interesting take on it. I wouldn't say they're removing key players and replacing them with rotation players. The core of the team is Son and Kane. Summed up your problem there. You've got no one in the midfield that you can build a core around. So you haven't got that midfield core of, let's say, 3 or 4 players who are your midfield. So you've got your starting midfielders and then your rotation midfielders. You haven't got that core. So there's your I think there's your issue there. I think they sacked Mourinho. Well, off the record, and this is an unofficial reason. Is he was against the Super League involvement, and then as soon as he basically, from what I read on social media, you got to take it with a pinch of salt, but at the same time, if enough people are circulating a rumor, it's generally more true than false. He told the players, "We're not training. We're protesting against this. We're making ourselves heard, and I want you." And I think he also encouraged his playing squad to go through the PFA and make their voice heard via their union. And then Levy sacked him. But the Super League involvement very quickly went wrong, and I don't think the idea has gone away. And with on top of that, you've got the World Cup planned every 2 years by FIFA, and again, FIFA Pro members. So this is the players. Remember this. This is the players. The players are crucial. If you can't get the players on board, no idea can get off the ground because there will be boycotts. And UEFA and CONMEBOL are still saying we will withdraw from FIFA, and they're the money makers. The the South American and European nations are what the fans want to see play, because that's where your World Cup winners will come from as things currently stand. If we were to have the World Cup this summer rather than winter, in a traditional location, it will be a South American or European team contesting the final. It may be an all European final, it may be an all South American final, it may be a mixed final. Generally speaking, the last 8 or last 4 will be primarily, there might be 1 or 2 African teams in there, there might be a Japan or a South Korea in there. But predominantly speaking, it's a South American, European shootout for the knockout stages, the later stages. So again, that's what the global fan base wants to see. They want to see your Messis or your Ronaldos, or I'm trying to think of your Mbappes. They don't want to see the Australian team. Who can you name out the Australian team right now? Because the Baduka era is gone, the Harry Kewell era is gone, the Mark Schwarzer gone. That's not a thing anymore. They've all retired. So what Australian players do you know? Household names? None. Okay, you might want to see Christian Pulisic and the US team do quite well because they've got the World Cup coming up in 4 years' time. But no, I haven't heard about the Champions League coefficient changes. That could happen. I do know that next, I think it's the season after next, the new format comes in, and I think that's where the coefficient changes come into that. Look, if I was in charge of UEFA and how I would reform European football is going back to pre-1997, and it's not going to happen. You get rid of the pointless group stage, which fans don't really like anyway, and managers and players. I mean, players want to play every game, but they get knackered. And the group stages of the Europa League and Champions League and now the UEFA Conference League. That's extra games players don't need to play. We're talking about player welfare. We're talking about fixture congestion. Just get straight knockouts again, like it was in the old days. The issues that UEFA have had is they tried to see off a Super League idea back in the 90s. So in 97, they brought in the Champions League group stage. In 99, they scrapped the Cup Winners' Cup and merged the Cup Winners' Cup with the Europa League, or the UEFA Cup at the time. 2 massive errors, and that's where UEFA were allowing the clubs basically to dictate to UEFA what direction European football should take. Fast forward 25 years, we've had this European Super League idea. We've had the battle between the clubs and UEFA has won. It should never have got to this stage, but the European Super League has always been mooted for the last 25 years because the clubs felt they had the power to do so. Some of the big clubs felt they had the the, the 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 power to do so because they weren't being put in check by UEFA. UEFA were very weak in that kind of governance. They always crumbled and gave the club owners basically extra revenue streams over player welfare, over fan, you know, what fans want out of the game. We are the people who make them the money, basically. And fans feel pissed off. It's not just a British fan thing, this is a European fan thing. Fans are left frustrated. But yes, any change to the coefficient will come in with, the new format coming in 2023. Now, whether that format is a success or a failure, time will tell. But a lot of fans are like, it doesn't suit football having the new format. This Swiss playoff kind of round robin system doesn't suit football. It may suit other sports, yes. Football, it doesn't. But to American fans, North American fans, it makes perfect logical sense because they're collegiate basketball, ice hockey, baseball, all the collegiate sports play this round robin system, especially basketball. So US and Canadian fans, they can buy in. And it seems to be it's a format again aimed at the overseas non-European TV audience. So we'll see if it works out. We'll see if it's the structural changes that are needed for European club football. I don't think it is. I think there's better ways to reform European club football, make the trophies actually mean something again, because I think they've been devalued somewhat. And it's always the same handful of clubs that are now making it through to the latter stages of the Champions League and Europa League. Pre '99 and outside, it could go on a run. Nottingham Forest in the late '70s, early '80s, their two finals were against Malmo and against Hamburg. So let that sink in. When Nottingham Forest won the old European Cup in '79 and 1980, the two finalists that they played against were from Sweden and Germany. Now, Hamburg at the time had a very good side, so you've got to bear that in mind. You've got to look at how they were doing in the Bundesliga. And Malmo in Sweden, again, very good side. Look how they're doing in Swedish football, which is not the case now. It's Helsingborgs that dominate the Swedish football now, so you've got to bear that in mind. But when was the last time you saw a Swedish team in the Champions League final? When was the last time you saw a German team that isn't Borussia Dortmund or Bayern Munich in the Champions League final? I'm not talking about Europa League, we're talking about Champions League. So yes, it's a handful of clubs that regularly contest the Champions League final now. On a small group of clubs that regularly make it through to the latter stages of the Champions League, and to a certain extent the Europa League, with Sevilla, which dominated that tournament for the best part of 15 years, that competition. So there is something wrong where a handful of clubs are the ones constantly dominating that competition, constantly. And so you got that issue. And a lot of those clubs were the ones that decided to come up with this European Super League. And it didn't go down so well. And then some of the clubs quickly realised, that this is a disaster. Yeah, Leverkusen and Monaco and Valencia, I just suppose in the last 20 odd years, Roma as well have had a decent run and things like that. You could argue, yes, you get on a run in a cup competition, the form goes out the window, and you are an underdog. And imagine if Leverkusen had beaten Real Madrid. Leverkusen were a good side in the early 2000s. Let's not forget they're not a bad team now. They were a very, very good side in the first decade of this century. And yeah, Monaco had a very, very good side with some very good players again in the early 2000s, and a lot of them were then cherry picked by other teams. And not long after that, they got relegated out of the French top division. So It's been a long road back for them. And I think they've only won the League One title, League One title once since that Champions League final. So again, there's things you know um, teams can go on runs, but it's less and less likely now. That's the point. That's the problem. Valencia, since their Champions League success under Rafa Benitez, they've won nothing and they're bankrupt. And it's the way that a handful of clubs with this European Super League kind of idea want to keep all the money, and it's a thing. But Bayer Leverkusen in the early 2000s, late 90s, up to the early 2010s were a very good side. Not to dismiss that, and they were on a course for a treble. And imagine if they won all three, how different German football would be, and how different European football would be. Just imagine that. Put that in there. But look what's happened to Schalke. Look what's happened to Hamburg. I mean, they're a mess now, and they were European stalwarts. Werder Bremen, some Stuttgart, some big German clubs in my lifetime are now in a mess. So it is very cyclical. Bayern Munich will not dominate the Bundesliga forever. Borussia Dortmund having that shock defeat against Rangers, that doesn't happen 5-10 years ago. Doesn't. So dominance is very cyclical, very very cyclical. Just in certain leagues, it's easier to regularly rotate who is winning all the time because it's a fairer league. This is where the French league with PSG just basically going sod the rest of the league. We're going to buy it for eternity, apart from the odd season where we might have a bit of a bad season. Not just the Monaco squad in 2016. You go back as far as I think 2000. Was it 2004? They made the Champions League final. 2003, 2004. I think it was back then they made the Champions League final. So there you go. There we have it. Spurs crumble and give a goal back. They just stopped pressing and tried to hold tight for a while. What are your thoughts on really defensive tactics? Any football about it? If you have a counter attack policy with being solid defensively and then counter attacking like a Wolves, for example, I don't call that anti football. I call that pragmatic football. I call that a pragmatic solution to a problem. That's my opinion on things. If you've got a solid defensive base, got some very quick wingers and quick counter-attacking players, that is a pragmatic manager with a pragmatic idea on how to play. I love counter-attack football. I hate constant possessions, ticky-tacky. I find that anti-football because you go a goal up and then you just pass the ball around aimlessly until the opposition gets so tired that you score 2 or 3 goals in the last 5-10 minutes and it looks like you crushed them 3-0. But in reality, you just scored a goal in the first 5 minutes and then just aimlessly pass the ball around until the opposition gets so tired or frustrated they either get a player sent off or they just get tired. That is anti-football because there's no attack, counter-attack, attack, counter-attack kind of openness to the game. So you have to play the anti-football, defensive football, where you have to stay organised, boring, and have the occasional counter-attack to defeat it. So anti-football breeds anti-football. So the Man City style, ironically, is not overly exciting if they're not ripping a team to pieces. If you've got a very organised defensive team that's frustrating them, it can be a ball fest. But yeah, the Monaco side that made the Champions League final in 2004 had some really, really good players in it. And then they got stripped of their good talent and they haven't really got back to the heights they should have since. And that void was filled by PSG. Because Lyon's dominance ended after 4 consecutive titles in a row, which was a record at the time for French football, which shows how competitive French football actually used to be. And then the PSG will buy the league for eternity came in, and people have switched off. And it's a known fact. People just do not watch French football. It's not very popular outside France, and even in France, it's not the most popular sport. And part of the reason for that is PSG have basically bought the league, and there's no competition to it anymore. And Lille last season was a breath of fresh air. It was a massive victory for the common fan. And their squad got again shredded to pieces because they can't financially compete. And the other team owners in France have said, even the big clubs like Marseille and Lyon have gone, we've got to be so financially prudent now. We've got to reduce our spending. And PSG go, well, we'll have that player, we'll have that player, we'll have that player. And it's just, Well, if UEFA are allegedly want to reduce the coefficient rankings basically if a team goes too far too often, it's basically designed to balance it up and make it a more fair competition because I think that is a reflection of where we've got. That's UEFA hitting back at the European Super League idea further and strengthening their position further, which I think is an outcome of the pure greed of a handful of clubs, and most of those clubs are basically also bankrupt. If these clubs were standalone businesses, they have gone under, and COVID has exposed their poor financial management and how badly run they've been off the field. Um, and it's also exposed a lot of issues within the sport where agents have too much power, they're not properly regulated, players are paid too much, fans are priced too much. I think ticket prices are shambolic. So league games are now capped. There's a cap on league prices. Cup games, there is no cap. They can say we're putting the price at X amount per seat, cheapest ticket. So there is that as well. I did think that the money bubble was going to burst anyway. At some point, the COVID pandemic sped it up by 5 to 10 years. I would have thought sometime in this decade, right now, we will be in this situation. I would say in say 2 or 3 years' time. I think. So when Berry was going out of business at the time, I remember all the videos I did on Berry and the situation with what happened there in a League One club, a lower club, right, club in the third tier of English football. This is before COVID, well before COVID. I basically said at that time, I think the money bubble is about to burst. It may take a couple of years for the full effects to go across the global game. But if a club that has been successful the season before, at their level, got a promotion, so that's prize money, that's you've won your league, you've got your prize money, can't even afford to pay its players, and can't even afford to start the season, tells you something's gone wrong. Massively, massively wrong. Fast forward till now, Macclesfield's the only other club in English football, at least, to go out of business. How any other clubs have survived and no other clubs have failed is beyond me. I don't know how we've got to this stage with no other clubs, be it here in the UK or in Europe, going under is a miracle. It is. I'm not sure how much longer we can continue like this because you've got your Derby counties, Southend are in trouble. We know that. There's about 10 to 16 other football league clubs this time last year, at least, that we know of that were about to run out of money. Now, yes, COVID has obviously sped up that process. But I've been following a lot of the fan pages, and I'm looking at some of the fans going to games. And bear in mind the financial climate that we're in, a lot of people are going to have energy bills going up. Food prices. There's massive cost of living crisis we have across Europe. It's not just a UK thing. Right, basically, if a team finishes fifth and a team like West Ham finishes fourth, the team below them could leapfrog. That's wrong. That's wrong. You are promoting a team based on past success, even though they've not been successful. That is wrong. It will be interesting to see because there has to be ratification of this. This is an idea put forward. That for me doesn't sit well. It doesn't. It's basically UEFA trying to bring those European Super League clubs sort of back into the fold a little bit, and it's again UEFA being weak. The clubs are holding too much power, and it's wrong. And I don't. I'm not. That it's an idea. It's a proposal. Whether it gets passed or not is another thing. But it's problematic because then you can get clubs that haven't been successful for a very long time suddenly getting assistant. Look, it's Rob Dorsett on Sky Sports, so he's not going to word it well at all. Basically, with the Champions League format changes, there's going to be a coefficient change. That's probably a better way to look at it. or a proposal to change how the coefficient works for the Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League, because they've got this stupid new competition that makes no sense. Bring back the Cup Winners' Cup. It's so simple. Couldn't make it up. You really couldn't. Bring back straight knockouts. Get rid of the group stage. So simple. Just so simple. But they don't want to do that because the big clubs and the TV money and the greed. But yeah, because it streamlined the whole thing. It streamlined the whole thing. Because at the moment, if you finish third in your Champions League group, you fall into the Europa League. So that rewards failure. That if you finish third in Europa League group, you go into the Conference League, rewarding failure. So instead of like going right, you're out, you're done. You get a second chance. But you're in the lower competition. So it's frustrating to me that they already do that anyway. It's a proposal. I haven't read it. I haven't read anything up on it myself. But to me, that doesn't seem like a fair system, and that is worrying, in my opinion. There's no two ways about that. I'm not going to hide the fact that I find that a broken system that's made more broken. There are ways to fix European club football, ways to do it. You just have to go back to basics. Unfortunately, UEFA football itself has got too greedy. There's too much money flowing around, and it's not in the right places. And what we're seeing is the European Super League idea. Clubs not just in financial stress, they're bleeding money, which they shouldn't be. These things should be profitable hand over fist. They should never be in debt. The football clubs should literally be making money out their arseholes, basically. They should be just shitting money because they've got too much of it. The problem is they're not spending it correctly. There is no proper enforcement of the financial fair play rules. And there is no salary cap. That's universally gone, right, this is what each league has to operate at. There is no transfer cap. So you get the Neymar transfer, which is ridiculous. You get clubs like PSG that have basically bought their league success because no other club in their division can financially compete because the financial fair play rules that are in place means that no other club could be bought by a wealthy owner who can then spend the money. So and then rewarding teams that have failed with it. You're still in Europe, but you failed in this competition, but you can still play a couple of games in this competition and you're rewarding failure, which then does nothing. It's the same cycle every season. Bring back straight knockouts, get rid of the group stage. Conference League, it's shit, basically. Basically, it fills the niche where the Cup Winners' Cup used to be back in 1999 when it was last played. And what UEFA stupidly did is they buckled to the big clubs, or a handful of clubs, and they brought in the group stages for the Champions League in '97. And then because they brought in those group stages, you couldn't have a cup winner playing in the Champions League also realistically competing in the Cup Winners' Cup because of fixture congestion. So they merged the Cup Winners' Cup with what was the UEFA Cup, which became the Europa League. And then in recent years, they brought in the group stages for the Europa League. And then they screwed that up because of the coefficient rankings of all the various leagues. So some nations you can only, let's say you win the Swiss league or you win, I don't know, let's go for a more minor European league like the Czech league or the lower leagues where if you won your domestic cup competitions, you went straight in the Cup Winners' Cup. Because they got rid of that, the UEFA coefficient doesn't work properly. So if you're like, the SPL is a good one. You have to go into the qualifying stages of the Europa League and Champions League, and you're less likely to make the group stages. Out of the European clubs in Scotland, only one of them makes the group stages, for example. So the coefficient don't work. So in order to make up for that lack of coefficient not working, they bring in the Conference League to basically a replacement for the Cup Winners' Cup 20 years plus after they got rid of it. And because they've brought in the pointless group stages where there's so many dead rubbers of games where you're just watching pointless football where there's nothing on the line. It's just two teams just going through the motions. Basically like a mid-season game with two mid-table clubs who are just not going to win anything. We're not going to get relegated. And you're just watching aimless, it's a boring 0-0. kind of football where there's no real impetus behind it because one of the teams may already be out of the Champions League completely, and the other team's already won the group because they've won their first 3 or 4 games. You've got those dead rubbers where players get injured, players get suspended and banned, and it's pointless, and it's just pointless fixture congestion. That's the best way to describe European football right now. My idea, if I was in charge of UEFA, which is never going to happen, is you restructure the Champions League to make it straight knockouts. You restructure the Europa League to make it straight knockouts. You bring back the Cup Winners' Cup, make it straight knockouts. You get rid of the group stage, and therefore all the domestic cup competitions and trophies mean something more. More teams have less fixture congestion, so more teams can compete for said trophies. It makes the domestic leagues more competitive, and then you'll get some really different teams in European Cup competition because the Cup Winners' Cup, because domestic cup competitions are fun, but they've been devalued for 20 odd years. So that's why some leagues have got rid of their league cups and I think like scrapping their FA Cups, which is ridiculous because then because of the devaluation of the domestic cup competitions, you don't get stories like a Nottingham Forest anymore or anything like that. Yeah, there are some really random teams in there, but if you have the Cup Winners' Cup, you get teams from all over Europe playing in a top level European competition that isn't classed as third tier. And yeah, UEFA screwed that up because they caved into the bully boy clubs like your Juventus, like your Real Madrid, like your Barcelona, like Man United, yes, Liverpool, yes, Bayern Munich, your Borussia Dortmunds. Basically, every club that was sort of muted to be involved in the European Super League or actually signed up for it at the time. So those successful teams in Europe up to 1997, before the group stages were brought in, basically, um, yeah, they basically bullied UEFA in the late 80s, early 90s to bring in the group stages for what became the Champions League, which was the World Cup, European Cup. And because UEFA did that, it completely wrecked the format of the Cup Winners' Cup. And the UEFA Cup got affected a little bit as well because then it fiddled with the coefficient. Because you bring in a group stage, you have to bring more teams into the Champions League, which then means the UEFA Cup and Cup Winners' Cup had to merge, and you screw up the coefficient. And some nations' domestic leagues have actually suffered as a result of that, which is why you have now got the big 5 European leagues rather than all the European leagues being top quality. There is now a 2-tier system in European club football, which is a result of UEFA's decisions in the 90s to restructure the Champions League and Europa League back then, and the Cup Winners' Cup in the 90s have led to the problems now. Plain and simple. I couldn't sum it up any better than that. There's a bit of cynicism in my voice, but basically UEFA caved into a handful of big clubs, Real Madrid and Barcelona being 2 of them. Lo and behold, you fast forward 20 odd years, you look at the situation now, and both clubs are basically bankrupt and are in financial. Well, you say that. I mean, look, it's a lesser tournament. It's not really wanted or needed. It is needed, however, because UEFA have screwed up the management of the European club game for 25 years. That's the best way I can describe it. You used to have 3 European Cup competitions. They got rid of one of them, and it devalued the the other European leagues apart from the so-called Big Five for 20 odd years, which then concentrated the finances and the power within those so-called Big Five for a very, very long time. And the last team to win a European competition outside of the so-called Big Five was in at St. Petersburg. So you talk about Leicester and Roma, that's an English side and an Italian side. They're part of the Big Five, the so-called Big Five leagues. So it doesn't solve the problems that UEFA have created by being weak in the 90s and caving to the bully tactics of a couple of big clubs that make them a lot of money. So if Leicester or Roma win it, there you go. I haven't really been following the NHL for a couple of weeks. But yeah, the Oilers changed their coach and suddenly results change. Who knew that Dave Tippett was the problem? The problem is how long will that coaching change have that positive impact on the Oilers, and how long will he stay in place? Because the Oilers go through a lot of coaches. He's a coach killer. The Oilers is a coach killing team. There's a reason why they've been to one Stanley Cup final since 1990. I'm just going to leave it. There's a reason why they were swept in the first round last year. I'm just going to just drop that mic drop there. And yes, I am a Jets fan, so I have a little bit of tongue in cheek with that one. But there is a reason why the Oilers is a coach killer. It's a goalie graveyard, and players don't want to play there. How Draisaitl and McDavid are still there, partly is because of the contracts they've signed. The fact that Nugent Hopkins has stuck it out there, it amazes me. Honestly, Ryan Nugent Hopkins, he's a warrior. He stuck it out when the team was worse than what it is now. He stuck it out. I think they've got the wrong player as captain in McDavid. His two-way game is shit. He can't defend. I'm going to keep it up. I'm going to be brutal here with the Oilers. McDavid's two-way game is crap. He's great going forward. Hopeless going the other way. Yeah, he can score a lot of points. You're not winning as a team. He's not winning as a team. Draisaitl for me is the better player, and Nugent Hopkins is the heartbeat of that team. There's your captain right there. Solved. Evander Kane, yes. I think I'm surprised he's still playing in the NHL with all his off-ice antics and all the drama that he causes. Give it time, something will happen with Evander Kane in that dressing room, and they will want to move on from him very, very quickly. Something will happen. Every team he has played at, ex-teammates are glad he is gone. So, yeah, he's got 8 points in 8 games. It's a point a game. That's a very good return. But you've got to think of it this way. He hasn't played all season, so he's not got any injuries. So he's fresh. Wait till he does something. Bear in mind, he's already been suspended for things and his off-field antics, like off-ice antics. Sorry, Evander Kane. Let's see how long that honeymoon period lasts before it all goes a bit wrong. I'm not sold that adding him is the solution to the Oilers' problems. They're not a balanced team. They're not a balanced team. Like Toronto, they're not a balanced team. Great in the regular season, fine. Playoffs, they fall apart. So there you go. That's my opinion on that one. Could you argue Koskinen's the problem in net? No. I think the team in front of him weren't playing, and he's facing a firing squad some nights. And it's the chances they're giving up. It's not that he's facing less shots than the opposition. It's where those shots are coming from. And look, as a Jets fan, we got better after Evander Kane left the team. Just putting it out there. When he was on the team, we were crap. We made the playoffs once. We get rid of him. We make the playoffs consecutive seasons until this season's looking a little bit ropey. We might still make it. And that's said with a bit of nervousness. But the team got better after he left. The team chemistry was better after he left. So the gold medal match averaged more viewers than any NHL match this season. That was the women's hockey, wasn't it? You will find that in the Olympics, you will get people who are casual viewers, and you'll get the US versus Canada. So that in itself is going to attract big viewership regardless of the sport. It's like England, Scotland in rugby or football. More people will tune in than any league game that season. It's an international. It doesn't matter. It's an international between Canada and the US. It will attract more viewers than a regular league game. Because a regular league game, you've got 32 markets to satisfy. And if, let's say, it's Seattle versus Florida, Seattle, brand new market to the NHL. Meaning there's been a hockey fan base in Seattle for a very long time. Florida, one of the smaller fan bases in the NHL, you're going to get more viewers. Because instead of having 2 club teams play, you're having 2 international teams play. And that, therefore, will answer your question. And that's the women's. Wait till the men's. Wait till the men's final because the Canadiens and the US aren't in it. That'll be interesting. The men's final is the showpiece event of the Winter Olympics. So if the viewership for that is less than the women's, that's telling you something. But it's the US Canada. It doesn't matter. That it's the women's game. It's positive for the women's game. It's the US and Canada. So you just answered your own question. That's why it would have more viewership. The 2 nations that have the most registered hockey players in the world playing each other in a final going to have the biggest viewership. And to be fair, it's not hard to have bigger viewership. The NHL's got a lot of off-ice problems with the restrictions in Canada and issues with Arizona. Although Arizona now signed the Tempe deal, so they're not moving. And people are like laughing at Arizona having to play out of a collegiate NCAA arena for a few years. They weren't saying move the Islanders when they didn't have an arena and they were playing out of the Coliseum that was falling apart. So this selective outrage pisses me off. And it's always from fans who support teams in the northeast corridor of the US and the original six. Annoys me intensely. Always move the team, man. No one asked Chicago to move when they were crap, or the Islanders to move when they've been hopeless, which is for most of the time since 1984. Or Toronto can never win a Stanley Cup. No one's asking them to be moved. So there is this obnoxious conservatism in the NHL when it comes to new locations. Oh, Florida, they don't support the team. Well, they've only had one Stanley Cup final appearance and they've only won playoff series in '96. So how can you get people to support a team that can't win a round? So with Columbus, it amazes me. So yeah, but let's have a look what's happening in some of the other sports news quickly. So I've discussed the Major League Baseball lockout. Now I do know that I do have viewers who like Major League Baseball and do like the NBA and do like the NFL and sports that I'm not necessarily a massive fan of myself. Doesn't mean I won't cover it. So I read one article about the Major League Baseball lockout. I'm going to read another article now about what the Players Association counter offer is, because that meeting did not last very, very long. So I read the one about the delayed to spring training. This is the New York Post. This is the counter offer that the Players Union. I mean, it's a couple of days old, so 3 days old. So this is not an article that was written yesterday. Let's just get rid of that video. Attorneys and accountants report Thursday. Not quite as exciting as pitchers and catchers, but that's all Major League Baseball has to offer at the moment is accountants and attorneys. Multiple sources confirm that representatives from Major League Baseball and the Players Association obviously met on Thursday. This is obviously Wednesday article. To collectively bargain once again. The players put forward a counter offer. So they already are basically unofficially delayed spring training at this point. They've obviously now announced a delayed spring training. They obviously, the season is still scheduled to resume on the 31st regular season. So they've now admitted they are going to delay the start of spring training until the beginning of March. Nothing really in that article that makes a lot of sense. New York Post. The Athletic. I like the Athletic actually. Let's read the Athletic. So this is the players submit revised arbitration proposal in brief meeting. So I'm going to read this one. The Major League Baseball Players Association revised their previous arbitration proposal in a brief meeting 2 days ago. It lasted 15 minutes. So I've already covered that. They altered their arbitration from 100% of all players who become minimum 2-year service arbitration able to only 80%. They've also proposed their pre-arbitration bonus pool be at 115 million, which is an increase of 15 million on the previous proposal they put forward. Basically, there was a side meeting between the head negotiator Dan Halem from Major League Baseball and the Players Association, Bruce Meyer. In total, there was 35 minutes worth of meetings on Thursday. That is crap, basically. So yeah, Major League Baseball, as far as we know, they've delayed the start of spring training. And it looks highly likely that the start of the season will be pushed back. Now, how much the season is lost, or do we lose the whole season is nothing. Baseball needs to evolve its dead game. It's a dead game. I'm not. I casually watch the occasional baseball game. Not gonna lie, I have done in the past. I actually find baseball sends me to sleep. Yeah. So in years past, when I've been having issues sleeping, I whack on a baseball game. that tells you what you need to know about baseball, in my opinion. Cricket doesn't send me to sleep. At least cricket, I understand what's going on. Baseball, I don't clue. Thoughts on Six Nations so far? Yeah, Six Nations so far. France is to lose. I think France are favourites for a Grand Slam. There's some tough games ahead for France. Ireland are still second favourites to win it overall for me. And I think there's a clear separation between France and Ireland and the rest of the nations. That's my opinion on that one. That's my thoughts on it so far. 2 games in. There's players injured. There's players suspended. There's going to be some squad changes. I think at the moment there's a clear separation between France and Ireland and the rest. That's my opinion on that. Where the other nations finish up, bonus points are going to prove crucial, be it try bonus points, losing bonus points, 4 try, that kind of thing. Looking at how they played that second half against Italy and how Italy really actually forced them to defend, and England didn't really have much going forward apart from the chances Italy gave them by overplaying themselves. No. The game management by England's not good enough. The penalty count, again, still too high. I think they were lucky not to get a player sin bin for constant infringements. I don't know. Marcus Smith, I'm excited by Marcus Smith, not going to lie. I think he's a very talented player. But other than that, Christ, if there's another injury in the fly half position, George Ford, why is he in the squad if he's not getting the game time? I have some concerns about the depth of fly half. If, let's say, Marcus Smith or George Ford gets injured, we have a problem. And Italy didn't challenge Marcus Smith defensively, but I've noticed England are moving him out of the 10 defensive channel a lot. They're trying to protect him defensively so he can focus more on the attacking side of the game. The 15-year-old Valavia, yes, right, okay. What I think comes out of this is a minimum age requirement to compete at the Olympics. She's still a child. If you think about it, she would still be in compulsory education in the rest of Europe and North America, and even in countries in South America, she would still be in compulsory education. So I think the IOC, as a governing body, which is what it is, it's the governing body that's hosting, in charge of these games, this event. I think they need to change the rules over minimum age requirements before you can compete at the Olympics. And I think they need to show a bit more mettle when it comes to dealing with not just Russians, but especially young athletes being not looked after by their coaches and support staff, because she's 15 years old. Like, I don't think necessarily she should be punished necessarily, because I've got the athlete welfare, which I've talked about a lot on this channel, is the athlete welfare. But definitely our coaches and the support staff need to be held to account. But it's the Russians, and of course there's a bit of a hot potato when it comes to Olympic and World Championship sport, in regards to the post-Sochi dealings over the last 8 years. It's become a political hot potato as well. I feel sorry for the young girl. I do. It's not a good image for ice skating, which has got its own history of scandals within the sport and athlete welfare issues, but for me, as a sports fan, I do think there's got to be a minimum age requirement before you can enter the Olympics. In my opinion, because she's still a kid. There's no doubt she's talented. No, there's no doubt on her physical ability to do her sport and her skill and her talent. But I don't think her coaches have her best interests at heart. Let's put it that way. Yes, I didn't know about the Scottish rugby player, but I did know about Uja being stripped of his Olympic silver, which meant we've lost the relay silver medal we got. which is promoting Canada to silver. And I do like Canadian sport, so it's not over a massive loss for me. But yeah, what does that mean though for a Scottish player admitting to? I'm gonna have to look at the Scottish Rugby Union player. Is it Rugby Union or Rugby League? Because I know there's been individual players who've admitted to doing things to cheat, whether it's like Ray Rooney admitting that when he was a player, he put extra long studs in his boots to hurt opposition players, and he would deliberately target players and all that. But yeah, I do about Nuja having his Olympic silver taken away. Um, we've won silver in the men's curling final. Mitchell Blake, he's frustrated is an understatement. He says he's gutting for us, the nation, everybody. Basically, his son was going to do the old because obviously, let's have a look at Rugby Union. Rugby Union. Who is the player? Let's have a look. Courtney Laws is back in the Six Nations squad to face Wales, and Sexton's good to go against Italy. Kelleher's ruled out with injury. Who is the player who is admitted to doping? I can't find an article on it. That's really annoying. That is really annoying. Who is the player? Ollie Wilkes. Let's have a look. Ollie Wilkes. If you pop performance enhancing drugs, could not care less. You are disqualified. Yeah. Ollie Wilkes. Let's have a look. He comes up. He's a former Scotland International Rugby League player. So he's already retired anyway. Right. Okay. Oliver Wilkes is a former Scotland Rugby League player who was a prop second row loose forward in the 90s, 20s, 2000s, 2010s. Last played for Workington Town in 2019. International playing career. Background, born in Lancashire, so how Scottish is that? Sheffield, Huddersfield. Played for a lot of. He's done the roads. He retired a couple of years ago. He played the 2008 Rugby League World Cup. Yeah, it doesn't say anything on his player profile about him doping, but the fact he's admitted to doing it in retrospect, that's doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that that's happening. I look at what's happened in the NRL with what's his name? There's a young Cronulla Sharks player who was banned, and Shandor and the peptide scandal. It doesn't surprise me. But yeah, no. If you get caught using them, yeah. I just think her age is a cause of concern because she's so young, and that's an athlete welfare thing. I think the RC will look at minimum age requirements to compete, and lengthier bans for coaches and athletes who are caught doping. That's my opinion on the situation. When you've got an athlete or a team or a guy in a team sport like Ollie Wilkes admitting retrospectively years after the event, going, "Oh, while I was playing, I was doped to my eyeballs." That's because he's not been caught by the testers that you're obviously verify from witnesses. Okay, I think it's a difficult one looking at. Getting caught by the testers is one thing, and I've done videos when individual players have been caught using recreational drugs, and you know, rugby league for me does have a drug and drink culture. I found it on Sky Sports 2 days ago. I thought it was worth mentioning. Yeah, no, he's not like a high profile player. So for me, he's not a high profile player. I mean, he's a journeyman player. Is the best way to describe his career. But he's still a professional. And if an ex professional's coming out saying, by the way, during my career, I was doped to my eyeballs, that is a concern that he managed to get away with it through his career and never get caught. That is a worry for me. Um, that's a worry over the integrity of the sport. Um, there can be no doubt on that. That has to be a cause of concern in my book, that he was allowed to he managed to get away with it. Um, but look, rugby league for me, I mean, there there is, in my opinion, um, definite problems within the sport. There is no doubt on the fact that there is a drink and drug culture within the sport, both here in the UK and Europe and in Australia and New Zealand. Um, there's definitely individual players doping. We know that, and I don't know what else you can really say. I mean, I watched some of the. Well, you say that. He was in two rugby league squads, and he was called up. So it's a difficult one. It, it it really is. It depends when he was doping and how long for, and what performance enhancers he was on, and what he's admitted to taking. I mean, it's like the Lance Armstrong interview with Oprah Winfrey, though. Like, he had no need to do that. He could have stayed quiet because he got away with it for so long. Why did he feel the need to go? By the way, my whole career is built upon cheating. Oh, by the way, the rest of my competitors were doing it as well. I don't understand why. It's the fact he's not a high-profile player. I think it's gone under the radar, but it is concerning that he managed to get away with it throughout his career, which has spanned 2 decades um, in the top level in the Super League. So that is concerning for me as a fan, but it's not surprising. It's not surprising. It's concerning, sure, but it's not a surprise to me that he's said in an interview retrospectively, "Oh yeah, I was doping." Now, um, that does have to raise concerns, and yeah, the questions have to be asked about the anti-doping authorities as well, especially when it comes to an international tournament. Now, whether he was like, "I'm not doping for the tournament because I know I'm going to get tested," that's another thing. That shows massive weakness within the the system, which is being exploited by players. I know in the NHL they only get tested twice a season, and generally it's done before Christmas. They don't get tested during the playoffs. So if you're caught doing anything, you get caught in pre-season, in the exhibition pre-season games, or in the first half of the season, and then you're very unlikely to get tested in the second half of the season unless unless the league has evidence that it's happening. So there is a lot of weakness within some sports in regards to this area. But I did watch a documentary a couple of months back about. It's an older documentary, but I watched a documentary about drug use, be it recreational or performance enhancing, in all levels of rugby union and rugby league in Wales, and it's endemic. So if you look at the athletes that are on the ban list right now for doping offences, most of them are not high profile. That's what's scary. Most of them aren't high profile, and most of them are in team sports like ice hockey, rugby league, rugby union, football, cricket. They're in the team sports. Over half the banned athletes are Welsh, and out of them, about 75% play both codes of rugby. Now, obviously, again, like, I haven't read the article. I can't find the article. I'm going to have another look. It's Ollie Wilkes. Yeah, I'm going to have another look. Let's have a look. Ollie Wilkes. Let's have a look. But if that is the case, and he's come out and said that, that could be interesting to see what actually um, let's have a look. Sky Sports. Here we go. Daily Mail, The Guardian, Sky Sports. Yeah, now it's coming up. Right, I'm going to look at Cumbria Crack, which is a website where I'd have to subscribe. So it's a Read the website. Cumbrian forward, latest pro player to admit doping. Now, this is interesting. Ollie Wilkes, let's have a look. Let's see what he actually stated. Previously worked in town, so that's where the Cumbria link. He retired in, oh God, now the article's doing crazy stuff. Oh, this is not a good web page for fucking internet. Oh, phone. Oh, no. Focus. Cumbrian forward Ollie Wilkes, who retired in 2019, is the latest, there's obviously more, former pro player to admit taking banned substances during his career. He was captain of Workington Town when he retired from playing in 2019 after the Derwent Park Club was the 11th club on his CV. So he played for 11 different teams. That is ridiculous. During his 21 years in the sport, totaling over 500 games, he played for all three Cumbrian sides, Whitehaven, Barrow and Workington. That's something that you don't do very often. So that's a bit of sporting history there. I've got to read it like this. I can't. He has been speaking frankly to ITV. He also gave an interview to ITV about his time in rugby league and the doping he was part of, and which he says is a major problem for the sport. Jamie Acton, another former professional, has only recently spoken out about doping in rugby league in the hope that it could be dealt with. In the ITV interview, Wilkes said he crossed the line a few times but was never caught. There were others who escaped sanctions throughout their careers. Oh, here we go. This is interesting. Wilkes said he first crossed the line during an off-season 7 years into his career when he was training with Whitehaven at the time. So this is not Super League level, so he's at second tier level. My ads. I agree. I signed for Whitehaven. I was only training 2 times a week, and they offered me all right money. I thought to myself, should I have some? Let's see what all the fuss is about. So I tried performance enhancing. So I tried a PED, a band one, and 6 weeks into the season, I got a phone call off Wigan to sign for Wigan. And I thought to myself, well, I thought it worked. So he's obviously improved his performance. Where I grew up, the nearest big club was Wigan. I grew up as a Wigan fan, and when I got the phone call that day, it was like all my dreams had come true. Did I feel guilty that I'd taken something that was illegal in sport? Or was it like, well, about time? I didn't know. I didn't know what to think. It's like, well, it's got me there, didn't it? Or did it? I was going to be playing, well, I was going to be playing that well that year to be seen and picked anyway. I don't know. But I know I was bigger and stronger. He claims that doping took place at a number of the clubs he played for. However, there's no suggestion that the clubs were aware of his actions. In an interview with ITV, so I used to see people who were as good as I was as good as, and then all of a sudden came back after a pre-season and they were massive, and I just see them absolutely tear it up. They were quite slow at the start of pre-season, just a bit heavy, and then they shred up a bit. I assumed they'd be clean by this point and avoided being caught. At one stage, I thought to myself, how am I going to compete with that person knowing they're doing what they're doing? He says the drugs of choice were growth hormones and peptides, which players believed to be undetectable. Well, they weren't, because Cronulla Sharks and Essendon got caught in Australia in the AFL and NRL. They took them variously to lose weight and aid recovery from injury or allow them to train harder and for longer. Jamie Acton was only 27 when he retired after the London Ball forward had played for 7 different clubs, including Workington Town in 2013. He recorded a lengthy video message on his Instagram account in which he detailed how drugs had affected his life and how he felt authorities went to great lengths to keep drug use quiet. He was later contacted by almost 50 players. Both Wilkes and Acton say they have spoken out so that young men faced with the same temptations that once confronted them will choose a different route and ask for help. In a statement to ITV News, the English Rugby Football League said it is committed to rugby league being a clean sport. The RFL condemns drug use in sport as doping is harmful to the core values of rugby league. It damages players' health and well-being, the fairness and integrity of the competition, and prevents all from the right to participate in a doping-free competition. And ITV have contacted for a response. Right, that's an older article. Daily Mail, however, one of the coaches has hit back. Leeds Rhinos boss Richard Agar hits back at claims doping is rife in rugby league after a former Scotland captain revealed he took performance-enhancing drugs and alleged coaches used to help stars dodge tests. Leeds Rhinos boss Richard Agar has hit back at claims doping is rife in rugby league. The sport was rocked this week when former Scotland captain Ollie Wilkes revealed he took performance-enhancing drugs during his career and alleged that coaches used to help their stars dodge tests. Former Leeds Centurions forward Jamie Acton, who was given a 2-year doping ban last month, has also claimed it would be abnormal for players not to have used drugs. But speaking out of Friday's game at Old Rivals Wigan, a guy who coached Wilkes at Wakefield said, "I completely disagree that drugs is a widespread problem in our game, and I've coached for 20 odd years. I can certainly talk about my club with great confidence and say it's not the case, and I think I can go back to all the clubs I've been at and say it's not a widespread issue. Any sport in the world will always find the odd individual that may not make the best choice, but I would say they're very minor pockets." Agar has also been angered by the RFL's decision to upgrade James Bentley's ban from 3 games to 4. As players get sent off. Players have been ordered to camp down on foul play to the head this season. So he's basically okay. The former Super League prop has blown the whistle in the hopes the sport will crack down on clubs helping to cover up the doping. As Wilkes said, on a couple of occasions, if drug tests are here, coaches will say, "Here's your chance to pop out." There have been a couple of times when guys have nipped out and their names haven't gone down on the drugs test list. An RFL statement said the RFL condemns drug use in sport. We actively encourage anyone who has concerns regarding doping to report them. So that's the Daily Mail's take. They go on and talk about a Leeds and Wigan matchup and other boring stuff. The Guardian. Let's see what Sky Sports actually has to report on this, because this is where the article, obviously, Jordan, you obviously picked up the article. Ollie Wilkes follows Jamie Acton to become the second former rugby league player in recent months to admit using performance-enhancing drugs. The former Scotland captain claims doping took place at a number of clubs he played for. Wilkes played for 11 different clubs during a 20-year career, and he had an interview with ITV News revealed that he used a banned substance during his time playing for Whitehaven and Wigan. That is interesting. The 41-year-old also claimed that doping took place at a number of the clubs he played for, although there's no suggestion that the clubs were aware of his actions. And then he goes on to, about how he mentioned how players would come back and they would get massive and they would get, ripped really quickly, bulk up really quickly. Wilkes also alleged that some coaches would try and shield their players when drug testers came in. On a couple of occasions, I could say that if anybody had been mentioned, drug testers are here. He said, if you're not here now, here's your chance to get out. And there's been a couple of times when guys have nipped out and their names haven't gone down on the list. Jamie Acton was banned from the sport for 2 years after a stored sample of his was retested. That is interesting. So he obviously tested negative at one point and it was retested. He'd also been retired for 2 years at this point. Acton, he retired. He accused the sport of making great efforts to cover up drug use. Now, the RFL is committed, as I say, doping free. The RFL works closely with UK anti-doping with the alleged breaches of the anti-doping rules being referred to and investigated by UKAD. The RFL has a significant focus on education of players, including online and with anti-doping workshops run annually. In addition, it is compulsory for certain sports staff to have completed a clean sport advisor course. In conjunction with UK anti-doping, we carry out a number of in and out of competition doping tests. We are also supportive of testing of historical tests, which is how Jamie Acton got banned, but he'd already retired by that point, so it's pointless banning someone who's retired from the sport. Weird, don't it? We actively encourage anyone who has any concerns regarding doping to report them. The RFL passes any intelligence in relation to anti-doping complaints or concerns to the anti-doping authorities. UK anti-doping spokesman said, "We take all information regarding possible doping in sport very seriously and encourage anyone with information to search protect your sport, pass the information us in confidence." In 2021, so last year, as part of an intelligence-led and risk-based testing program across sport, 600 tests were done in the Rugby League, making it the third most tested sport after football and Rugby Union. UK anti-doping prosecutes athletes who fail and evade tests and remove them from sport those who cheat. Samples from many athletes are also kept in long-term storage, which is what happened to Jamie Acton. They didn't mention the player they banned, but it's Jamie Acton. In the last 5 years, 14 rugby league players have been banned for various doping or drugs offences. It's important to note that the testing alone does not make a robust anti-doping program. We work closely with the RFL to ensure that education programs make athletes and support staff aware of their responsibilities. The former club Whitehaven have responded to the former forward's claims, saying they were not aware of any use of banned substances by him. He played 6 games for the club 16 years ago, and at no point were the club aware of his drug taking. Whitehaven Rugby League Football Club wish to state our players are rigorously tested for all banned substances and go through regular talks on the standards and expectations that are required to play for the club in the great sport of rugby league. The club will be making no further comment on this matter now or in the future. Brian Carney, who works for Sky Sports, will clearly say there's not a widespread issue, the ex-player. Sky Sports' Brian Carney is adamant that rugby league does not have a widespread problem with doping. Please. Where is the word sorry in all this? The game of rugby league has now got to go public and defend itself against charges of widespread performance enhancing drug abuse in sport, which is not the case. I'm close to the game, close to current players, recent retired players, it is not the case. Okay, I'll believe that because obviously Sky Sports has the major TV deal and Channel 4 doesn't. That's the Daily Mail. That's the ITV. Right. Let's have a look at the Jamie Acton. Jamie Acton. Rugby League. Let's have a look. Here we go. Now, this is it. Rugby League News is actually Rugby League News wanted me to do a podcast with them at one point, so I'm actually willing to read this article. Band Jamie Acton calls out Sky Sports pundit Brian Carney and challenges him to a debate. This is important. This morning, Sky Sports pundit Brian Carney dispelled any claims that Rugby League had a doping problem. ITV News last night released an article with former Super League players Jamie Acton and Oliver Wilkes regarding their admission to relate taking performance-enhancing drugs while playing the sport. But Carney this morning dismissed the idea, stating, "I roll my eyes when we now see them roll out and talk about some issues they have faced subsequent to their bans or coming out and describing the events of their careers. Where's the word sorry in all this? The game of rugby league has now got to publicly defend itself against charges of widespread performance." Yeah, that's what he says. However, Acton has told Serious About Rugby League that Carney is merely trying to protect the sport's integrity and called on the former Irish international to debate with him. I would love to debate with him live on Facebook or Instagram or on a podcast. He's trying to protect the integrity of the sport. I get it. But burying head in the sand and sweeping stuff under the carpet never solved anything. That is a pretty short article. So that's an interesting one. So yeah, let's have a look. Let's have a look at what news articles. Manchester Evening News is also quite good when it comes to sports corruption and scandal stories. Super League coaches hit back over rugby league drug taking accusations. 2 former players have admitted to taking performance enhancing, although Jamie Acton's actually been retrospectively banned following his retirement. So that's interesting. Super League head coaches Richard Agar and Willie Poaching have insisted drug taking is not rife in the game. Former Leeds and Cheeries forward Jamie Acton, who was handed a 2-year ban last month after a reanalysed sample he had provided tested positive for a banned substance. He has claimed it would be abnormal for a player not to have taken social or performance-enhancing drugs, so recreational drug use. And former Scotland international Oliver Wilkes told ITV earlier this week he had taken performance-enhancing drugs, claiming he often felt it was essential in order to compete for a place in the team. Leeds Rhinos boss Agar, who coached Wilkes during his time at Wakefield, said, "I completely disagree that drugs is a widespread problem in our game." He also said, "I would say the timing of the comments after a very positive opening round of Super League is disappointing. We had a wonderful opening round and I thought the sport emerged with a lot of credit." Partly because it's on the TV. Pretty well. I'm not sure of the motive, but I hope Ollie, on a personal front, is okay. Wakefield head coach Poaching, who has worked as an assistant coach at Leeds, Warrington, Salford, and Hull, KR, criticised Acton Wilkes over the timing of their allegations. He goes, "It's not an issue for me. It's just surprising that people start shooting off after the fact and after they've retired. If they feel it's an issue, they should speak about it when they're playing and help others. It's disappointing when we're trying to put the game in a good light that the ex-players are trying to do something to tarnish the game." I don't think they're actually trying to tarnish the game. I think they're just speaking the truth. We all get tarred by that brush because outsiders look at the game and think it's just rugby league and players as a whole, but it's not, from my experience. I think we're one of the best sports in the world for testing. Testers have been to my house when I played, and they have the right to go see players on holiday if they need to, while players do get tested rigorously. The RFL's chief regulatory officer, Karen Morehouse, says she does not recognise that. I like the way they're just denying everything. It's brilliant. They're just on full denial mode, the RFL and the Super League. Of course they would be. A number of forward players at the highest level have come out and spoken really passionate about how they don't recognise those comments, and I think it casts an unfair light on the vast majority of players who play the sports entirely clean. I also say, as a mother of young children who were just starting their journey playing rugby league, there's absolutely no way I put them into the environment I thought were actions comments reflect reflection on the sport. UK anti-doping said earlier this week that it has carried out more than 600 drug tests in rugby league last year. 76% increase in testing numbers compared to the same period in 2020, so April to December, which is when the season's technically the regular season's on. With the most tested sports being football, cycling, boxing, rugby league, and rugby union. In the past 5 years, UK anti-doping has published decisions, so 14 players have been banned, including Zach Hardacre and Ranky Chase, for recreational drug use. The UK Anti-Doping Director of Operations, Hamish Coffey, said, with the easing of government restrictions in the UK in 2021, we have been able to boost testing numbers significantly throughout the last 3 quarters of our financial year. With the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games taking place last summer and the build-up to Beijing 2022, it's been a vital time for us to try and grow back our testing program post-COVID-19. Whilst we're always trying to deliver a risk-based and intelligence-led testing program, our education and outreach programs continue to be a huge focus for us as they aim to educate athletes and those around them the risks of doping and the importance of sport integrity and fair play. That is interesting. I think that I don't think they're two isolated players. I think there is an issue there, and I think the sport's in denial. Well, I don't think it's every single player in every single club. I think the sport's in denial. What else? Predictions for England versus Wales and Scotland versus France. I think France win that game against Scotland. I think England Wales is going to be a tight, scrappy affair because both sides aren't playing well. I don't have a prediction of who's going. I think France will win against Scotland, but I think England Wales will be a very tight, scrappy affair that could go down to the last 5 minutes and be very, very close. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. And I think it'll be there won't be free-flowing tries. I think it's going to be a very close, scrappy game. It's going to come down to penalty kicks and maybe the odd try here or there. In regards to what Wilkes and Acton have been saying, I think it is a widespread issue, and I think the sport is in denial about it. Because Acton got retrospectively banned after a sample was reanalysed after he retired. So it doesn't actually affect anyone he's playing for. And he retired at a young age, which says something to me, that he decided he's having issues. The way that people still within the game are saying, trying to dismiss these comments and basically victim blame, because that's basically what they're doing. Were the players at fault for doping? Yes. These are adults. These ain't a 15-year-old kid at the Olympics and the ice skating competition whose coaches haven't got her best interests at heart. These are grown men who know what they're doing is wrong. At the same time, they felt pressured to do it in order to achieve more in the sport. And they were aware of others doing it as well. And getting away with it for so long because coaches were protecting them. If the coaches were aware they were doping, it just it reminds me of the peptide scandal at Cronulla Sharks and in the NRL, and the Essendon Bombers scandal in the AFL back in the early 2010s, where they were fully aware of what was going on. And individual players at other teams were also caught up in the scandal because they were also doping. So, in my opinion, yes, they were fully aware of what they were doing. At the same time, their coaches were fully aware of what they were doing, and it wouldn't surprise me if there were a lot more retroactive bans. If the UK anti-doping says it works on intelligence and is trying to get through a backlog of testing, and that they're now can test for more substances now that they weren't able to test for 5, 10 years ago, I can see more players getting caught. And the fact that 14 have been caught says it's not just an isolated individual here or there. We're into double figures now. Out of 600 samples, 14 have come back with positives in recent years. That says to me it isn't just isolated individuals. That's a pretty high percentage coming back. And it's not every player getting tested, every registered player getting tested. So, in my opinion, I think not everyone's getting tested. And I think there's a bigger issue there at play than the RFL would like to admit to, or those involved. I think they're in denial. I think they've been exposed and they're in denial. And it's not making the headlines because other bigger news stories are happening. If this was to break during the World Cup and players at the World Cup were to test positive, be it in one of the big nations like England Australia, New Zealand, Tonga during the World Cup. Yeah, but I also don't think it's making massive news because rugby league is not as popular as it used to be in years past. Not all the rugby league players now are household names in the UK, which they used to be. Um, and so, yeah, but I do think there is a problem there. I've watched a number of documentaries, and I've read a number of articles and a number of interviews, and I look at some of the playing performances, and yeah, there's a number of players currently getting caught, and now a lot of the testing is done on intelligence rather than random. So, oh God, it's dusting in here. God, that's dusty as hell. Got to tidy up my flat. I've got to do some tidying up tomorrow. I think in the flat. I do think there's a wider issue within rugby league, and I'm a massive fan of the sport. I'm a massive fan of the sport. Um, but that says to me that at all levels of the game, from Super League downwards, that it's taking place. And at the lower levels, it's probably easier to get away with it than the higher levels because there's less money in the sport. Um, and yeah, with the World Cup coming up, I can see some players wanting to boost their performance. Absolutely. And of course, UK anti-doping's on the back foot because of the last 2 years with the restrictions of face-to-face contact and social distancing and working from home and all that. They are playing catch up. Oh yeah, no, he's clearly got to. Both of them have got to, coaches. And they're trying to say, well, why? What the timing of it? Both are now retired, and both retired in the same year as well, which is again very coincidental. They both retired in 2019, and I think the fact that Jamie Acton on his Instagram had about 50 plus current and ex players contact him in a positive way, in a sense that he's what he's saying is not um, it's not isolated. And if we've got 14 positive test results for recreational and performance enhancing drugs in the last few years, and I remember when Zach Hardacre got caught and Ranky Chase got caught with their cocaine bans back in 2017. That seems like yesterday, doesn't it? It's what, 4.5 years ago. Yeah, no, that says to me that the situation. I think there's. I wouldn't say it's endemic or every club's got a. I think there's enough of them. Enough of a significant minority of players doing it that it's a problem. Now, I don't think it's the numbers that I don't think it's as widespread as well. I'm not naive. I think there's an undercurrent in every sport of drug and alcohol use. I think rugby league is a compare rugby league to rugby union. I think rugby league is far more physically demanding on all players. Um, there are very few small players in rugby league, um, and there is definitely a drink and drug issue with rugby league. There's rumours circulating of some very high profile players who regularly, you know, use hard recreational drugs. There's been big scandals before, so yeah, I do think that there is. Yeah, well, clearly his admission. Well, if this was in like Australia, I think this would or New Zealand, this would make massive headlines. And it wouldn't surprise me if they are reporting on this in Australia at some point. They're picking it up in the media in the build up to the NRL season kicking off in the next couple of weeks. Um, it wouldn't surprise me if that starts making the headlines down in Australia and New Zealand. Um, but yeah, it's definitely there's got to be some validity to it for such an angry response, um, and the claims of denial and not knowing. They knew. While they may not have sanctioned said use, they are clearly fully aware that their players are doing it or have been doing it. Now, whether they haven't named anyone, as in the Acton and Wilkes haven't said, "Oh, so and so has also done it." But the fact that they've been contacted by basically two full squads worth of players, current and past, who have obviously done it as well. That's quite a high number. So if you think about it, that's that's quite a lot. I think that yeah, because these two players I mean, one was a former national captain. That is a problem. But because they're not household names and because the sport isn't as global as, let's say, right, if this was Rugby Union and these were high-profile Rugby Union players, that's or if this was a Sonny Bill Williams kind of level in the rugby league world, like an international high-profile player who's played in the NRL and also played in the Super League, then yes, that would suddenly make massive news headlines. I think, yeah, because they're lesser known players that hardcore fans would know about, but the wider public, especially the wider sporting public, will just have a passing knowledge on the teams that they played for or the sport they played in. Yeah, I think it goes a bit under the radar. But the fact that two players have contacted each other, ex-players, and what the Jamie Acton one's funny because they banned him after he's retired. It makes no sense. Um, Even though he could technically re-register as a player and come out of retirement, they both retired in 2019. So these are historic allegations. It wouldn't surprise me if they both been contacted by UK anti-doping and they're giving names of players. And those players that have contacted them are also giving evidence saying, look, we'll give evidence. Now, I can see the timing of it makes whatever sense you want to make it. No sense, a lot of sense. I don't put a lot of emphasis on the timing of what's been said because they could have said it at any time. They could have come out at any time. Both these players have been retired now for 2 years. Now, they both retired at the end of the 2019 season. They both were not high-profile players. Well, Wilkes, to a certain extent, was a captain of his country for a brief period, but they're not like your Latrell Mitchell, James Tedesco, George Williams kind of NRL Super League talent player. These are not these Adrian Morleys. These are not the well-known players, be it here or in Australia. And they're just some example. But the Zach Hardacre one made big news and got a lot of attention when he got banned for all his various issues. That got a lot of coverage. I think because they're less known, these are journeyman players. They're not like superstar players who will be playing at the World Cup. These are not playing in the Challenge Cup final and then testing positive, like doing a Zach Hardacre before the Super League Grand Final and testing positive for cocaine and getting banned for 2 years. These are lesser known individuals in their sport. So these are your run-of-the-mill squad players who are these are journeymen. These are just your average players who are solid but not outstanding. And you tend to forget about some of these players that are squad players. These are the guys who go, when you're watching the Super League or the NRL and you're watching it and the guy gets a couple of appearances a season, he's there, injury cover, that kind of thing. He might play half a season for the club, starting or off the bench. You don't really pay much attention because he's not a key component to the side. Probably gets suspended for some dodgy foul play quite a bit. Drop your average squad player. he doesn't play every game. He's there. He's part of the elite squad, but he's not a key integral superstar. He's not. Um, but I do think the RFL are the statements by the RFL saying we're not making any further statement on this. Well, they're no longer registered players. They don't have to. But the fact that UK anti-doping are really being very rigorous. Right? We're playing catch up, and they've mentioned in their statement a lot of our testing is done on intelligence. So I wouldn't be surprised if these two, Acton and Wilkes, have encouraged those 50 people who contacted them to talk to anti-doping, and then we could suddenly see a snowball effect. The issue is we're in a World Cup year, and the sport is in difficulty. Let's be honest, the sport is in difficulty financially, and COVID's impacted that, and there are a lot of issues with the sport. So the sport right now needs good news stories, and this is the wrong type of attention the sport doesn't want or need. But yeah, if it was a more high profile player, like a Kevin Sinfield, for example, that could be massive, absolutely massive if it was like a Kevin Sinfield or a Jamie Peacock, who was the one. Right, so Harry Kane has just scored. Wow. So only three teams have won twice. Conte's Chelsea, when they won the league. Wolves, Manchester United have only. Yeah, that's interesting. So if Spurs do the double, that's the only thing they're going to win this season. Um, no, if it was a former England big name like an Adrian Morley or someone like that, or a Sam Burgess, that would be earth-shattering news. It would be the same in Rugby Union if it was like a Dan Carter or a Johnny Wilkinson, um, or a Brian Habana. That would be earth-shattering if they were to admit retrospectively, oh, by the way, I was doped to my eyeballs half the time. I think, yeah, I do think the RFL is in denial. I think the sport is in denial. I think, you know, I think the fact that these two players haven't named any other players, but have basically um, said they have been contacted by current former players and that they know they're not alone, and they're not saying that everyone's doing it or that it's but there is an undercurrent, and I think UK anti-doping statement is a bit more telling than the RFL saying we're not making any further comment on this. Whereas UK anti-doping said a lot of our testing is done by intelligence. Um, I think yeah, there's more to come from this. I think this is not going to go away. I think the RFL are it's going to come back to bite them. I don't think this issue goes away. I think the RFL would like it to go away, but I'll say this. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think that in both codes of rugby, ice hockey, AFL, American football, if they were doping in baseball, a non-contact sport, for 30 years, yeah, it's a problem. And I look at the size of some of the players now and how big they're getting, and I'm even watching some of the NRL pre-season matches that took place this weekend. I've got to watch. There's some more tomorrow, and there's another one Monday, and I've got to rewatch some of the ones that I missed. But I'm looking at the size of some of these young 18, 19, 20-year-olds. They're looking big. They're looking big. So, if baseball's been doping for years, the steroid scandal in baseball, I'm not naive to think it's not happening in other sports. And I wouldn't say it's every player's doing it or every team's doing it, but we saw what happened with Cronulla. in the NRL about a decade ago. And that sent shockwaves through the sporting world because it was also linked to the Essendon scandal. That made news headlines over here. And AFL is not very popular over here. So, yeah, there's definitely something to be said. I think that the RFL are knowing that they're now a minority, not the most popular sport, the popularity is doing, but they can sort of sweep it under the carpet to a certain extent. It's going to be interesting to see if more players who've retired go actually no, it's a bigger problem than um than the RFL cares to admit. But it's two ex-players who both retired. One of whom's had a test retested and has been retrospectively banned after retirement, coming out and saying that this is a thing. But it's it's definitely a thing. I wasn't aware of these. Much was happening. I mean, there's been multiple players over the years that have had individual bans. Who play rugby league, and I don't know what you can say. I mean, it is individual players getting caught. At the same time, it's also players getting caught for recreational drug use as well. And so there is this ongoing issue with the culture within the sport, and it keeps happening, regardless of the educational programs that UK Anti-Doping and the RFL run. It still happens. So it makes you wonder how regularly they're testing. But they've caught 14 who failed on the tests, be it recreational or doping. So it says to me that it's not isolated to it's happening. Let's not be naive. So yeah, we'll see if anyone else gets caught out. We'll see if evidence is given over saying, where players decide to name names or admit to use. Do I rate Christian Romero? Oh, Christian Romero. Let's have a look at Christian. Oh, there's so many. Oh, he's Argentinian. Well, he's on loan from Atalanta at the moment. Do Atalanta let him go to Tottenham on a permanent at the end of the season? Well, he's his parent club's Italian, and they breed good defenders. And I think he's solid. I don't think it. I don't. We'll see if he decides to stay at Spurs or if he decides to go back to Atalanta. Regardless, I mean, look, Atalanta are a solid Serie A side. They're not a bad team. There's a reason why they got to a Champions League semi-final last year. So they're a pretty handy outfit themselves, are Atalanta. He's a South American defender. They're known to be quite physical. He's an Argentine defender as well. They tend to breed them quite well down there. I haven't seen enough of his play to make a comment, but I watched him in the Brighton game in the FA Cup the other week. I would say he's solid. He's young. He's up and coming. I think the issue is not the player, but the team he's currently playing for. I think there's a lot of issues with Tottenham underperforming. Regardless of the result tonight, the manager's come out and said the squad isn't good enough. The manager's come out and said the team isn't good enough, and they're on their third manager in 12 months. So there's issues with the team, not the player. I think he's a solid player. I think if you're playing at the top level, um, you're doing pretty good. Let's be honest. If you made it to the professional game, you're doing pretty good. Let's not kid ourselves. He's not a bad player. Is he a world class defender? I think. Let's see how he does in the Premier League for another full season if he decides to stay, or let's see how he does in Serie A. But the fact he's playing his parent club and he's been voted the defender of the year in Serie A says to me he's a pretty decent up and coming player. If he can do that consistently, getting voted player of the year at club or in his position in the leagues he plays in, and let's say he goes to the World Cup with Argentina and has a brilliant tournament, then we can have the discussion of how good he is. Um, but I think you could argue he's playing. He's played in the Italian league, which is known as a more defensively minded league, and he's now playing in the Premier League, where it's more of a competitive, high energy league. The style of football is different between the two leagues there. I'm saying that he's not a mug if he's playing for Atalanta and Tottenham. They're two solid clubs. I think the issues with Tottenham is the structures at the club and bits and pieces. Oh, Shevchenko. Shevchenko. Yes, Andrei Shevchenko. I, 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 I would suggest you just look at his highlights reels on YouTube or old footage of him play for Dinamo Kiev and AC Milan and Chelsea. There's what can I say? A fantastic player. Um, She- Shevchenko. I mean, there's no way to describe him. I think the best way to describe Shevchenko is look at footage of him playing in the 90s and the 2000s. I think he was one of the best players in Europe, if not the world, between 98 and 2004, 2005. I think he was one of the best players in the world at the time. He was on the cover of FIFA a couple of times. I think, yeah, he and Sergei Rebrov at Dinamo Kiev in the mid 90s when they were coming through. Rebrov ended up at Tottenham. Shevchenko ended up AC Milan. But um, at his peak, I think he was one of the top five, if not, yeah, one of the top five players in the world at his peak. Um, Even towards the end of his career, he was still a really good um, attacking player to have. Um, but at his peak, as I say, his AC Milan days, I would say peak Shevchenko for me would be 99 to about 2004, 2005. Peak Andrei Shevchenko. And I can say that because I've watched his entire career, so I've seen what he can do with in an attacking sense. His time at Chelsea, he didn't. By that point, he's near the end of his career and he's winding down. However, still a solid squad player at that point. But it's what he does on and off the field. So on the field, obviously, he's a superstar. In the dressing room, he's a very important. What's the difference of a one way? I wouldn't say that Shevchenko is a pure one-way striker, but he would definitely linger about the halfway line. So it was actually very hard to catch him offside. As his pace left him, he would drop a little bit deeper to then link up the play with the midfield, or he would hover in between the centre line and the box in that third of the field, or that quarter of the field. I wouldn't say he was a one-way striker though. I would say he was a sniper of a player, but he had a bit more to his game than just being a goal poacher. Um, he could definitely be involved in build-up play. And as his career wore on and he scored less goals, he was definitely involved in assisting in build-up play with other players. He would bring other players into play. But there was no doubt on the power of his shot and the accuracy of his shot. And his shooting percentage was very, very good. He was very, very accurate with his shooting percentage of shots on target out of all shots that he took. I think about a third of his shots were on target, which is above average um, under pressure in open play. He was good from the dead ball. He was good in open play. He was good in and around the box. He was good in the build-up play as well. Is he the best Ukrainian of all time? I would say he is the ultimate Ukrainian player of all time. Yes, you could argue Timoshuk, former representative St. Petersburg and Bayern Munich, also is got the claim to be Andrei Timoshuk, his former teammate with the national side. You'd also argue, possibly with what he's achieved in the game with silverware as well. And then you've got Yarmolenko right now, who's trying to beat his goal scoring record and appearance record for Ukraine. So there's a couple of other players who he's played alongside who I could also argue. Which Klitschko are we talking about? Because there's two brothers. Remember that. There's two Klitschkos, and they're both world champions and both very scary men. But if we're talking about football, then you've got a couple of contemporaries. If we're talking about all time, you've got the Klitschko brothers in boxing. There, there's a couple of other Shevchenko or Timoshuk. Yarmolenko is, I think, underrated. But got Piatov, the goalkeeper, who had a very, very long career as well. So there's quite a few Ukrainian players who are contemporaries of Shevchenko. But Shevchenko at his best, Sergei Rebrov maybe. Rebrov and Shevchenko as a strike partnership was terrifying in the Dynamo Kiev days, but the game has evolved since they were playing at their peak. The style of play's changed. What players are, you've got to be a bit more two-way player now. You've got to track back a bit more. The days of an out-and-out sniper like Gary Lineker are long gone. But Shevchenko in the build-up play as well could create for other players. Just look at his highlight reels. It's not just pure goal scoring with Shevchenko. There's a little bit more to his game than that. How would Shevchenko play in today's game? You'll probably get more the team player attacking midfielder Shevchenko rather than the striker Shevchenko. I think he'll be more effective as an attacking midfielder than an out-and-out striker in today's game. If he was playing now, if he was the young Shevchenko of Dynamo Kiev, I think he would probably be more of an attacking midfielder, maybe a winger. Even so, still a brilliant forward, brilliant player, and I grew up watching Shevchenko play, so I've been lucky enough to see Shevchenko at his best when he was coming through Dynamo Kiev, and then obviously on to AC Milan and Chelsea. I was lucky to see him at his best, and yes, he was on the cover of several FIFAs as well. So he made the cover of video games, and definitely one of the household names of European football. But if people over in the US are talking about Shevchenko post his retirement, he's a good player. Let's be honest about that. If people in the US are aware of who Shevchenko was in the 90s and the 2000s, that says to the rest of the world, yeah, we've got a good player here. There's a lot of players who are really good who are unknown in the US and Canada because they don't have that brand or they don't get the Ballon d'Or. But Shevchenko, yes, one of my favourites. Samuel Eto'o is another one of my favourites as well, who's played. There's a lot of good players from that era who are now retired, who are either in administration of the game or in coaching from the 90s and 2000s and into the 2010s, who've now retired, that 20-year period when Shevchenko was still playing. The Milan derby, yeah, I'm surprised Ibrahimovic, who's played for both clubs, doesn't have more goals than Shevchenko in that rivalry. To be honest, that surprises me. Um, that Ibrahimovic, who's played for both Inter and AC Milan, um, doesn't have more. But I think does Ibrahimovic play for Inter Milan? No, I'm surprised Ibrahimovic though doesn't hasn't beaten Shevchenko or even Inzaghi. Pippo Inzaghi hasn't you know um, got got more goals than that. Um, to be fair, AC Milan were a blast to watch in the early '90s as well. AC Milan between the mid '80s to the mid 2000s were brilliant. Um, they had some brilliant players play for them throughout that period. It's they have declined. There is no doubt on that. But AC Milan during my formative years were great fun to watch when I was a teenager. The problem with AC Milan is they had this aging squad, and age caught up with them, and they didn't do enough to keep the squad young. They were too reliant on aging players, and then they all seemed to retire very very quickly. And then it was a big problem when the core of their squad was it was an older squad, and age caught up with them, and they never really. And yeah, financial mismanagement, but also an aging squad also caught up with them. They didn't inject enough youth into the team, and their core was aging and got older and got older and got older, and it did catch up with them, and the the game changed and got quicker and got younger, and they got older and slower. So yeah, kind of a thing. But AC Milan in the '80s and '90s was brilliant. Into the early 2000s, they were brilliant to watch. Um, they had brilliant players. The Italian league was brilliant at the time they were playing. As it was. I felt the Italian league at the time was better than the Premier League is now, in my opinion. Um, and you had Paolo Maldini. He made his debut before I was born. He only retired. Crikey, when did Maldini retire? Maldini played for. He debuted when he was 18, and he retired when he was 43. I think played for 25 years. Yeah, I'm surprised Ibrahimovic and Inzaghi aren't higher on that list, considering the amount of time they played for AC Milan as well. Or Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo, not Cristiano. We're talking Brazilian Ronaldo because he played for Inter. I am surprised that some other players haven't got on that list higher up. Um, but Shevchenko at his peak was just brilliant, and yeah, I look back at Italian football in the '90s and the 2000s, and that was my favourite period of football. It was the best league in the world. It had the best players, and it just isn't the same. I grew up watching a young Del Piero, a young Shevchenko. You had Pippo Inzaghi. I grew up watching, you know, Italian football in the '90s and the 2000s. It was great fun. And it has declined in recent years, and it's nice to see it finally on the upswing again. But it's not the same. It doesn't have the same appeal for me that it did 20 years ago. Italian football has definitely gone through a change, um, and I don't necessarily like the direction of what it is now. But I've gone off football a lot. I just watch the FA Cup in the international tournaments now. It doesn't have the same appeal it did when I was like 14, 15, 16. Um, the appeal of the sport has changed, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And while it's the most popular sport on this channel for what I cover, um, Yeah, but you look at Ibrahimovic and Inzaghi and Ronaldo and the original Ronaldo, not Cristiano, and yeah, they 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 don't have more goals, and they were you know some of the best players in the world. Um, there's two World Cup winners in there, and Ibrahimovic, who all on his own is probably the cult hero of football of the last 25 years. Um, Absolutely ridiculous the amount of Champions Leagues and World Cup appearances and records that Ronaldo and Inzaghi and Ibrahimovic have, and the international caps and games played and goals scored, and how they're not even close to Shevchenko and goals scored in the Milan derby is ridiculous, ridiculous. But it is what it is, you know. But yeah, that's an interesting point to end on. It is an interesting point to end on. We'll see what happens with the doping allegations made um, by those two ex players, Wilkes and Acton, in regards to rugby league and what actually happens. Because I think you can't have two unrelated players who play for different clubs at different times who both retire. One gets banned retroactively after retirement, but you can't have two professional players coming out who are not related to each other. They're not teammates at the same club at the time they retire. Just coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, we were off our eyeballs on doping," and then you know the aftermath. That says to me that there is a problem, and the sport is just is what it is. Mourinho prefers the original Ronaldo. And yes, I do as well. I do as well. Um, he played with more of a smile on his face and less of a entitled arrogance. Um, and original Ronaldo doesn't have the scandal off the field that Cristiano does, because there are allegations of improper conduct against Cristiano Ronaldo and some dodgy tax affairs. I prefer original Ronaldo as well. Injuries did for him and health issues did for him, but I prefer original Ronaldo. And original Ronaldo, like most Brazilians of his era, made a smile on his face. He could have had a better haircut, and he could have had a better dentist, but Ronaldo Nazario, um, for me, yeah, I would pick him every time. But you know, injuries and health issues did for Ronaldo Nazario. Um, but you cannot Roberto Carlos as well. One of those players you play with a smile on his face. Um, Again, at their peak, some of the best players in the world, if not the best players in the world. Roberto Carlos, Cafu, and Ronaldo. Um, yeah, you're going to win tournaments with those players. Oh, wait, they did. They were brilliant, absolutely brilliant players. And Adriano, yes, he did play. He did play for him. Not as good as Ronaldo and Rivaldo and others. Not on um, the same level. I will say that. Roberto Carlos was left-footed but could score with his right. Ronaldo, two-footed. Adriano, all left foot. He didn't have a right foot, so you're very easy to defend against Adriano. Whereas the others harder to defend against when they're in attacking positions. Um, and they they played in the right way going for. I mean, there was a bit of diving with them, obviously. There was a bit of rolling around histrionics, but not at the same level as a Neymar or Cristiano Ronaldo and all that. But they played with the right attitude in the right way. It's the best way to describe those players. Um, yeah, I would have um, original Ronaldo, modern Ronaldo. Ronaldo Nazario, I would have in my team over Cristiano. because he seems to have a more positive impact on the dressing room, and and post-retirement, he's very humble after he's retired. He comes across as a very humble individual, post-retirement, and he does a lot of charity work, and he enjoys his retirement now. Have an abnormal amount of players become distracted playing in Milan, or is it the same amount as other more tame European cities? Milan's a pretty. I've been to Milan a lot. Milan is a lovely city. Milan is a friendly. Milan is like London or Berlin or any other big regional or capital. Milan is like Rome. Um, it's a very intense city surrounded by you know other intense cities like Bergamo and your Turin, and it's the main area in Lombardy in northern Italy. So it's one of the biggest cities. So it's like a London or a Manchester here in the UK, or a New York or LA in the US. A lot is happening there. It's a big city, but it's a beautiful city. It's got a lot of history to it, a lot of importance to it. I don't know. I've been to Milan a lot. It's I wouldn't say players have got distracted playing in Milan. Personally, there's distractions in every location, um, like Liverpool, Manchester, or Paris, or playing in Germany. There's always something to distract a player. Um, but no, Milan is like is an amazing city. I think it's an amazing city. But I've been there a lot. I've explored it a lot as a kid. I've got um, I've been to Rome a lot as well. I've been to Italy a lot. So my opinion on it is possibly going to be different to an opinion of someone who hasn't been there. But it's a very fast-paced city. Like, I mean, I live just outside London. I've been to London a lot. I prefer Milan over London. Just going to put it out there. Just going to say that now. Um, any big city, there's going to be distractions for you know young men who are playing professional sport and getting paid a lot of money. There's always going to be distractions for you know um, you know young men in their late teens to late 30s. I'll call it the 1830 club, which I'm a member of, obviously. So if you're 18 or 34, um, there's going to be distractions. There's going to be nightlife. There's going to be things going on. It's a vibrant city. It's a global city. I wouldn't say it's other European cities are more tame. Wouldn't say that. I've been to a lot of cities in Europe. I've been to I've been to big cities in France. I've been to big cities in Germany. Um, I've been to a lot of cities and towns in it. I wouldn't I wouldn't say that. Did Robbie Keane play with Christian Gareth Bale? Christian Bale's an actor from Nottingham. Gareth Bale's a bloke from South Wales, uh, who apparently plays for Blotland. You mean Gareth Bale? Christian Bale is an actor who played Batman. Just gonna put it out there. Christian Bale's an actor. Gareth Bale. Yes, Robbie Keane was at Spurs towards the end of his career when Gareth Bale was coming through. Yes, he did play with him. Christian Bale is an actor who played Batman and was in American Psycho. Uh, who's from Nottingham and is a very intense individual. That is Damn it, I watched The Dark Knight too many times this week. Yeah, so Christian Bale is an overrated English actor who I can't stand um, from Nottingham. Gareth Bale is an overpaid wanker from South Wales who I can't stand, who played for Tottenham and Real Madrid and Southampton and is overrated. Ford versus Ferrari, yeah, Christian Bale, he is a very good actor, but I just find him too intense, and he doesn't know how to switch off. And Gareth Bale is an overrated guy with a top knot who likes playing golf in his spare time. Um, it would be interesting to see how Christian Bale would have played at left back or left wing for Tottenham for all those years. But no, yeah, I find it funny that you got them confused. They do look similar though. They may be related. I have never thought of that. They could be related. It could be quite interesting if we actually found out they were related. That would be really interesting if Christian Bale and Gareth Bale were actually related. That would make me laugh a lot. But yes, I do believe Robbie Keane was still playing at Spurs at the time. Gareth Bale was in his early days there after leaving Southampton. Um, I do believe, yes, he was there at the time before going to Liverpool and LA Galaxy to wind down his career. So, yes, I do believe Robbie Keane was still at Spurs at the time Gareth Bale made his switch from Southampton to Spurs, yes. Um, but yes, that is a very interesting mistake. I've never heard of that one before. But no, Christian Bale is a very intense actor from Nottingham, and Gareth Bale is an overrated sportsman from South Wales. He went to school with Sam Warburton, the former Welsh Rugby Union international captain, um, and he's the same age as me. Um, Gordon Ramsay was not a successful football player before he was playing for Rangers reserves, and he made a couple of appearances and did his knee. Um, he wasn't overly successful. He didn't actually get to play for the senior team. But yes, imagine how different that would have been if Gordon Ramsay hadn't had a knee injury. How different TV would have been because we wouldn't have had a foul mouthed chef swearing at people um, for viewership on TV. It would have been a very different world. But yes, he was a budding up and coming football player, and then he did his knee in. And obviously, career change required. So there you go. He was playing for Rangers at the time, and he didn't quite make it to the first team. Unfortunately, injury ended his career. But that's a problem. Gordon Ramsay was lucky that he managed to find a career as a chef in the catering industry, and obviously he's gone on to be one of the most famous TV chefs in the world. Well, he's a global brand now, as Gordon Ramsay. People know who he is. But a lot of young players don't make it for injury or it didn't work out, and they don't take that next step, and they don't have that other interest like Gordon Ramsay had for cooking that led to him becoming a professional chef to have a career outside of football, or rugby union or rugby league or NFL or whatever it may be. They have a very short career. They either briefly make it to the top level, very short career, injury or illness or personal circumstance doesn't quite work out, and they retire or they don't make it in the sport. What do you do? So Gordon Ramsay was actually one of those lucky ones who forged a career outside of sport and has gone on to, you know, become one of the most recognised TV celebrity chefs there is. And he's got other programs other than cooking programs that he's involved with. He's now a media personality. He's very, very lucky that his, I will say, catering career is the way to look at it. His restaurant career kicked off and became what it is, and made him, he got this reputation as a very foul-mouthed head chef, and he ended up becoming a TV icon over here in the UK. And then it obviously became very popular in the US, and obviously his career went from strength to strength, and that's what we get today because he got injured and didn't recover from that injury, and he had to give up his football career quite young. Is it a shame? Is it a loss to football? Yes, I think it could be. With that kind of passion and attitude he has being a chef, imagine what you could do on the football pitch. Terrifies you, doesn't it? Um, but we'll never know how good a player he could have been. And is it a shame he didn't make it? Yeah, I suppose it is from a sporting standpoint. It's never nice when a young, talented player who's wants to make it doesn't. It's never nice, especially when they've made the team photo. It's hard as a kid, and everyone says never give up on your dreams. When you get hurt and things happen, you realise you might not make. Look, Gordon Ramsay obviously had another passion for cooking, and obviously, I think his injury did obviously make him who he is, and it made him what he is today, because he had to make that choice. He had to find employment, and obviously it's worked out for him. Um, but he wasn't guaranteed success in what he's doing now. Um, but yes, there needs to be more options for those in academies and going through the youth ranks. That if they don't make it, they have employment opportunities and training opportunities. And a lot of them, the story doesn't end up so well. There's been some very tragic stories of players, doesn't matter what the sport, don't make it in the sport they've basically been trying their whole youth to get to. And they're in their late teens, early 20s, it doesn't work out, and things end tragically, and it has happened. And so I think back when Gordon Ramsay was in the Rangers youth setup and in the reserves, uh, you did have to do an apprenticeship. You did have to do a job, so you had to get a trade. And I think he was already working part time in a restaurant anyway, and then he got injured and he got himself a full time job in a restaurant. So I think he got lucky. But now you could argue that not enough is done. If it doesn't work out for the player, they do have a backup. They do have that safety net. Um, More could be done, so there's that safety net there, so that it doesn't work out on a professional sporting standpoint. They can still have a career in some industry. Um, but yes, Gordon Ramsay is a very interesting. I'm gonna have to look at the look at Gordon Ramsay for a video, because it is a shame that he didn't make it as a player. It'd be very interesting to see what style of player he would have been. Very interesting. Um, but it is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for everyone who has. Do you think that's an advantage of an American amateur sports that might have to go to college? Um, that's a good question to end on. Is it an advantage of the American system that there's a collegiate system, even though not all sports use the collegiate system? That is interesting. We do have the university system over here as well. Isn't it an advantage? In some circumstances, yes, but other circumstances, no, because the amount of money it costs to go to college is a problem unless you get a sports scholarship, and then you have certain requirements you have to fulfill before, and even then, if you finish college and you also go to the draft and then go undrafted and you fall out of the system, you've still been basically told you're going to be a sports star. Here's a college scholarship. Even so, I think there are advantages and disadvantages to the North American system, yes. The European system is different to the Australian system. There are pros and cons to every system when it comes to sport, professional and amateur sport, in my opinion. The disadvantage, I think, to the NCAA system, especially when it comes to the NFL and to a certain extent the NBA, is the NBA only has one minor league affiliate, and the NFL doesn't have a minor league. The only league that's really an affiliate, really anyway, is the CFL, and paying that is crap. You don't earn a lot of money in the CFL. So there is a flaw to that system, whereas with baseball, Major League Soccer, and to a certain extent, the NHL, there are more minor leagues where you can end up playing, and there's more professional leagues over in Europe where you can end up playing. So I think there's pros and cons to the NCAA system, and not all sports require the NCAA system for drafting either. Like the MLS and the NHL, for example, also don't require that kind of the NCAA system. They're not as reliant on it. And if a player does go through the NCAA system, they can actually end up playing professionally in Europe or Asia, for example, in a chosen sport. So there are flaws to it. There are pros to it. There are flaws to it. I think the sporting culture in the US and Canada is significantly different to the sporting culture over here in Europe and to a certain extent Australia as well. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. It's a good question to leave it on because with what's happening with Major League Baseball right now, that is a good question to end on. And of course, it looks like NCAA America was insane. Some teams have champion. Yes, they do. Some of the stadiums say over 120,000. So yes, they have some stupid. The Rose Bowl, for example, is one of the biggest stadiums. The Michigan Stadium's huge. There are some massive stadiums in NCAA, ridiculous sized. Um, but that is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for all your questions this evening. Really appreciate it, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.